Chapter 55. Looking at this shocking scene, I remembered what my friend had told me. On the 1st and 15th day of each month, corpses would come to the Yellow Spring River. At that time, I had thought that it was just a random, nameless corpse, so I didn't pay much attention to it. However, after seeing this scene, I finally understood why my friend had said that no one in the village had ever swum in this river, and why they called this river the Yellow Spring. The corpses were lined up in a straight line, silently drifting forward. Under the bright sky, I couldn't see the end of the line. How many corpses did they have to have such an effect? My heart skipped a beat. If there were only corpses, it wouldn't be a problem. However, if they were all like the previous corpse, there would be a large number of ghosts waiting for us. Although those dried corpses didn't have any clothes on, and I couldn't tell which era they were from, they were at least several hundred years old. Ghosts that had been bred for several hundred years couldn't be underestimated. Moreover, there was a large number of them. Not only did my face turn grim, but the fatty and Zhao Yongquan also had the same expression. With Zhao Yongquan's hand seal, he could deal with 1 or 2 ordinary ghosts at the same time, no matter how strong they were. However, the number of corpses in front of us seemed endless. If even 1/10 of the corpses we saw turned into ghosts, we wouldn't be able to deal with them. Moreover, the number of corpses kept appearing. Who knew how many more we hadn't seen? If we couldn't deal with them, we would have to summon Tong. To Tong, as long as the other ghosts didn't turn into Een spirits and become Een gods, the number didn't matter. After the corpses lined up in a straight line and floated past us, people gradually got used to it. They recovered from the shock and started to guess the origin of these corpses. Chief Lu called us together. He didn't talk about the large number of corpses in front of us. "Do you want to take a detour?" Tang Mingyang and Fan Jichao agreed, but Zhao Yongquan and I didn't agree with this suggestion. Although we knew how dangerous those corpses were, we were metaphysicians. We had seen this strange situation before, so we had to investigate it. If we didn't do anything because of the danger, how could we improve our metaphysician's realm? Seeing that we weren't enthusiastic, President Lu felt a little awkward. Although he wasn't a metaphysician, he clearly felt the danger. If he didn't make a prompt decision now, who knew what would happen after dark? However, he had to consider my and Zhao Yongquan's face. Just as he was hesitating, Fatty suddenly said, "I remember when the father and son left today, the young man seemed to have something to say, but he was interrupted by his father." President Lu frowned and turned to ask him, "What do you mean?" The fat man smiled and said, "That father and son pair look like herb farmers. Obviously, they gather herbs for a living. Rare herbs usually grow in the mountains. Today, the father and son were carrying empty basket. Obviously, they were going into the mountains to pick herbs. But after meeting us, they went back in the direction they came from. Don't you think it's a little strange?" Zhao Yongquan also reacted. "You mean, the father and son know the way to cross the river?" Fatty nodded. "Although this place is already deserted, it only took us one morning to get here from the scenic area. For herb gatherers, this place is far from being deep in the mountains, and it's even more impossible for them to pick good herbs. Combining all the circumstances, the father and son pair definitely know the way to cross the river." President Lu thought for a moment, then gritted his teeth and said, "All right, since they know the way to cross the river, let's invite them over. Fan Jichao." President Lu called Fan Jichao over and gave him some instructions. Then, Fan Jichao brought 4 to 5 people with him and hurriedly headed in the direction of the village downstream according to the map. As for the rest of us, we stayed by the riverbank to rest. However, because the large number of corpses in the river looked too scary, we retreated a few hundred meters away from the riverbank in the end. About 2 hours later, when we finished dinner in the evening, Fan Jichao came back with his people. Together with him was the father and son pair who looked like they were in tears. Judging from their efficiency, Fan Jichao must have found them and kidnapped them without saying a word. President Liu tried to talk to them in a friendly manner, implying that we must cross the river and that we needed their help. The young man seemed a little scared and didn't talk much. His father kept shaking his head, saying that Grandpa Mountain God wanted to punish them. In the end, President Liu couldn't stand it anymore. He directly took out 50,000 renminbi and said that it was their reward and their last condition. If they didn't accept the toast, they would have to drink the forfeit. The old man didn't seem to be moved. However, before he could say anything, the young man agreed. "Okay, I'll take you across the river." At first, we had only guessed that they had a way to cross the river. But now that it was confirmed, they couldn't refuse. The old man looked at his son with a sorrowful face. In the end, he could only nod reluctantly. At this moment, the negative emotions caused by the floating corpses in the river were finally relieved. We heaved a sigh of relief. The father and his son also introduced themselves. Their surnames were Zheng, so we called them Old Zheng and Little Zheng. After agreeing to take us across the river, Old Zheng told us how to do it. "Tonight, at midnight, a path will appear on the river. I know the location, and I'll take you there." A path will appear on the river? It sounded a little strange. Instinctively, we didn't believe it. However, when we asked Old Zheng, he didn't want to tell us. "When the time comes, we'll know if we follow him there. Don't be afraid." Tang Mingyang and the others laugh. If he's not afraid of the floating corpses on the river, why would he be afraid of anything else? Old Jing said slowly, "That bridge is more dangerous than those corpses." Tang Mingyang smirked to show that he didn't believe him. The others also laughed and didn't put Old Jing's words in their eyes. It was time for dinner. We used the supplies we had brought and ate to fill our stomachs. Then, we started to pack up and prepare to leave. Before we left, Old Zheng went to find Mr. Liu. "Tonight, I'll take you across the river. Can I let my son, Little Zheng, go back to the village first?" Mr. Liu smiled and called Little Zheng. He took out 50,000 renminbi and said, "If you go alone, you can take one person's money. If you go with two people, you can take two people's money." As soon as he said that, Little Zheng said, "I can go with you." Old Zheng sighed begrudgingly and didn't mention it again. After packing up, around 11 o'clock p.m., Old Zheng took us to the upper reaches of the Yellow Spring River. Since we were walking along the river bank, the full moon shone brightly on the river. We could see a row of floating corpses clearly in the dim light of the night. The surroundings were gloomy and gloomy. However, after looking at it for a long time, my heart gradually became numb. We were moving in the opposite direction of the floating corpses. However, our team was in a straight line which looked similar to the line of corpses. I glanced at my team and then at the line of corpses on the river. I felt as if life and death were blending together. Soon after, Old Zheng and his son, who were walking at the front of the team, stopped and signaled to me that we had arrived. I lifted my head to look at the river and couldn't help but take in a deep breath. The river in front of us was also full of corpses. However, they weren't in a straight line like the ones downstream. Many corpses were piled up horizontally, covering the entire river. Moreover, these corpses were not crawling in the water. Instead, they were lying on their back. On their skull-like heads, black mouths were wide open, staring straight at the moon in the sky, as if they were trying to absorb the moonlight. The moonlight shone on the two eye sockets, giving these mummies a pair of moon-white eyes. It looked strange and terrifying. The bridge that Old Zheng was talking about was actually the floating corpse bridge made of a pile of corpses. Looking at the numerous corpses under the moonlight, I recalled the death scriptures saying that zombies were born by swallowing the moonlight. My heart felt numb. Chapter 56. Everybody was dumbstruck by this strange and terrifying scene, including Zhao Yongkuan and me. We were speechless. At this moment, the calmest ones were Old Zheng and his son. Old Zheng didn't seem to notice our expressions. He continued to nag, "When you step on those corpses, you must be careful. Don't bump into those old skeletons." It was a new way of addressing those corpses as old skeletons. However, he didn't need to remind us. Anyone who crossed the river while stepping on so many corpses would be very careful. Little Zheng was proud of himself. He shouted, "Didn't you say that you weren't afraid when my father tried to talk to you? Why are you so scared that you don't dare to move now?" Young people weren't shrewd. They couldn't hold their anger back. As soon as they got the chance, they returned the favor to us. Chief Lu and Zhao Yongquan were experienced people. Of course, they didn't care about what he said. They just frowned and stared at the floating corpses on the river, their faces dark. The fatty and I didn't mind him. We focused on studying those corpses. Tang Mingyang's team's veteran subordinates couldn't keep their composure. A short, sturdy, big-headed veteran stood up and pretended to be disdainful. "What's there to be afraid of? It's just a pile of corpses, right? When I was a soldier at the border, I've crawled through mountains of corpses and seas of blood many times. Why would I be afraid of these corpses?" As soon as he finished talking, he stomped on the riverbank and jumped toward the corpses in the river. "Come back! I don't dare to go down there." Chief Lu and Old Zheng's voices arose at the same time. However, it was too late. The big-headed veteran had jumped into the air. He couldn't turn back and directly landed on the corpses on the riverbank. Lao Jing anxiously waved his hand at him. "You little boy, I haven't finished talking to you. Why did you go down? Come back quickly, don't offend old Gu." When Big Head first stepped down, he still looked a little scared. He looked around carefully, but when Lao Jing finished speaking, he saw that everything was fine, so he became proud. He stretched out his foot and stomped on the corpse he was stepping on. He grinned and said, "What else is there to explain? Isn't it just stepping on these things? Don't tell me this person's body is quite hard. It's like stepping on a wooden board." This guy was really stupid and bold. As he spoke, he stretched out his leg to kick the corpse beside him. It seemed like he wanted to explore the way forward. But at this moment, the dried corpse under his feet suddenly swayed. He stood there with one leg and his body immediately became unsteady. He staggered and fell onto the corpse next to him. Before his body fell, the dried corpse that had been lying flat on the river suddenly stood up and pounced on Big Head. When the people on the riverbank saw this scene, they all let out a cry of surprise and subconsciously took a step back. By the time they reacted, Big Head had been tightly hugged by the corpse. He fell on the other corpses and struggled desperately. This guy may have seen mountains of corpses and seas of blood, but he had never been hugged by a corpse. He struggled and screamed in fear. Tang Mingyang's veterans were the first to respond. Several of them rolled up their sleeves and prepared to go down to save people, regardless of why the dried corpse was moving. It could be seen that these people had deep feelings for each other. At this time, Lao Jing shouted again, "Don't move. You can't go down there." Just now, they didn't listen to Lao Jing's arrangement. Now that he said it again, Tang Mingyang and the others did not dare to act rashly and stopped. Lao Jing hurriedly ran to the river and shouted at Big Head, who was still entangled with the dried corpse, "Don't move. Slowly move Master Gu's hands and feet away. You'll be fine. Hurry up and come back." After all, Big Head was a retired veteran. At first, he was scared and struggled. Now that he heard Lao Jing's words, he quickly calmed down. He reached out and slowly moved the dried corpse's arms and legs away. Then, his body shrank little by little and ran back to the shore like a dog. When he came up, Lao Jing knelt on the shore and muttered to Master Gu, "Please don't blame me." Tang Mingyang and his people quickly surrounded Big Head and checked him for a long time. Except for his clothes being a little wet, there was nothing serious. Boss Lu walked over with a gloomy face. After waiting for Lao Jing to atone for the corpse in the river for a long time, he asked, "Old friend, what's going on? Didn't you say that we can cross the river from here? Why are these corpses moving?" Old Jing got up from the ground. He looked angry and said, "We can cross the river from here, but I haven't finished talking yet. These old skeletons won't harm people. However, when people walk, some of them will touch human energy and jump up to attack them. I was about to tell you about this, but your people just jumped up. You can't blame me for this. After listening to old Zheng, I nodded. According to the death scripture, when the moon shone on a corpse, this could happen. However, these corpses weren't old skeletons as old Zheng had mentioned. They were called shadow corpses. After the shadow corpses came into contact with people and inhaled human energy, they could move. However, they didn't have consciousness and couldn't bite people. They could only follow the smell of living people and jump on them. These shadow corpses weren't really scary. They just used their yang energy to move a little. However, there were too many corpses in front of us. If they all got up, it would be troublesome. Chief Lu wanted to discuss with us, but old Jing said, "These corpses can only appear before 3 o'clock a.m. After that, the corpses will scatter. We must cross the river immediately." We didn't have any objections, but Zhao Yongquan shook his head. "It's not good to cross the river like this. I need to check the corpses first." I understood that he was worried about the soulless corpse he had seen earlier. If all these corpses were soulless corpses, when we crossed the river, we would encounter a large number of ghosts. Little Zheng was worried. Several generations of my family have stepped on corpses to collect herbs in the mountain. At most, they would encounter the old skeletons people. But there's no danger. Who was Zhao Yongquan? He didn't care about little Zheng. He directly asked his men to go to the shore and drag the corpses up. Tang Mingyang's men went there and hooked a corpse. However, they couldn't drag it up. The lower part of the corpse was tangled by something that looked like seaweed. Eventually, Zhao Yongquan had no choice but to go to the shore. He asked his men to tie the corpse to the shore with a rope. Then, he used the soul-searching seal to search the corpse's soul. When I saw him make a hand seal to guide his Tao energy, I suddenly remembered something in the death scripture. If a corpse shone on by the moon took a breath of qi, it would become a shadow corpse. However, if it took a breath of Tao energy, it would become a zombie. Zombies weren't like the shadow corpses, which didn't have any intelligence and only knew how to pounce on people. Zombies were brutal and liked to eat human blood. They would kill anyone they saw. If they really created a zombie, it would be a big problem. With this thought, I hurried to stop Zhao Yongquan. No matter what, don't use your Tao energy to touch the corpse. You might create a zombie. After Zhao Yongquan's hand seal was interrupted, he frowned and turned to look at me. "Are you from the Xiangxi corpse-raising sect?" I didn't know why he asked that. Instinctively, I shook my head. Zhao Yongquan asked again, "Are you from the Miao area?" I shook my head one more time. Zhao Yongquan swung his sleeves and said unhappily, "Kid, if you don't know about zombies, why are you talking nonsense?" It turned out that he didn't believe me. I couldn't blame him. The corpse-raising sect was very mysterious in the metaphysics world. They didn't have much contact with the outside world. Moreover, the method to create zombies was a secret technique that outsiders couldn't easily learn. If it weren't for the records in the death scripture, I wouldn't have known about it. I was worried about how to explain it to Zhao Yongquan, but he didn't say anything and continued to make hand seals. Chapter 57. In folklore, zombies were commonly seen. However, real zombies rarely appeared. In the legends, the shadow corpses were considered zombies, and even some dried corpses that couldn't move were considered zombies. Although their numbers were small, their power was extraordinary. Zombies were different from Yin souls. After a person died, Yin souls were formed by 2 of the 3 souls. They didn't have a physical body. Although they were mysterious and unpredictable, they didn't have any real power. They could only use bewitchment and confusion to harm people. Normal geomancy masters or people who understood geomancy had ways to deal with them. However, zombies were a physical body. They were monsters that were born after a person's body didn't rot after death. In legends, zombies were soulless corpses. After the 3 souls were scattered, the 7 spirits controlled the body, which gave birth to a ferocious monster. The saying of 3 souls and 7 spirits had been around for a long time. However, geomancy masters could easily sense the 3 souls, but the 7 spirits were vague. Only when they reached the heavenly master realm could they understand a thing or two. Moreover, even the lowest level of zombies was stronger than humans. Moreover, they weren't afraid of swords or spears. They didn't know pain, and they often carried corpse energy and corpse poison. Not to mention ordinary people, even ordinary geomancy masters couldn't deal with them. Only after reaching the earthly master realm could they use talismans and other methods to deal with them. In the death scripture, there were several corpse-subduing talismans that could be used to deal with ordinary zombies. However, this was under the premise that the geomancy master had prepared beforehand. If an earthly master met a low-level zombie, the geomancy master didn't have the corpse-subduing talisman, so he wouldn't be a match for the zombie. Moreover, this was just the lowest-level zombie. If the geomancy master met a high-level zombie, even the corpse-subduing talisman wouldn't be able to deal with it. This was also the reason why the corpse-nurturing sects were so powerful in the metaphysics world. Through the corpse-controlling technique, even a newbie in the corpse-nurturing sect could control an ordinary corpse. Their strength was not to be underestimated. Because of the zombie's power and toughness, I panicked and tried to dissuade Zhao Yongquan. However, he didn't appreciate it. After drawing his energy and forming a hand seal, he directly pressed his palm on the dried corpse's abdomen. Seeing this, I secretly prepared myself. If the dried corpse turned into a zombie and became difficult to deal with, I would call the fatty and run away. It was a dangerous journey to begin with, and Zhao Yongquan wanted to create danger himself. I didn't need to stay and die with him. When Zhao Yongquan's handprint pressed onto the mummy's body visibly trembled a few times. However, it immediately calmed down, as if nothing had happened. What was going on? Could it be that there was a mistake in the death scripture? I looked at the dried corpse, which hadn't changed at all. I was puzzled. Zhao Yongquan slowly retracted his hand and glanced at me. Although he didn't say anything, everyone could see the disdain in his eyes. I quietly recalled the records about zombies in the death scripture. I was puzzled, but I didn't say anything. However, Zhao Yongquan frowned again. He turned around and told Director Liu that the corpse was still a soulless corpse. He was worried that a large number of spirits would appear nearby. While the two of them were discussing, little Zheng seemed to be very impatient. He shouted that his family had crossed the river from here for generations. If there was any danger, his family would have died long ago, and it would have been impossible for it to be passed down to the present day. Don't worry and just follow him to cross the river. What he said made sense. Eventually, after Director Liu and Zhao Yongquan discussed, they asked old Zheng to take us across the river. Since we had to be on guard against the shadow corpses, we formed a big circle. After we stepped on the bridge, we carefully walked to the other side. Only old Zheng and his son stood outside of us, one in front of the other, watching the surrounding situation. After going down into the river, the Een corpses pounced on them again, but with the example of Big Head, everyone calmed down a lot this time. After pulling the Een corpses away, they didn't care much and quickly left. When we reached the center of the river, we heard a scream from the back of the group. I followed the voice and was surprised to see little Zheng. A dried corpse was crawling on his body, tightly hugging his neck. Since the shadow corpses kept pouncing on people, we weren't surprised anymore, especially Tang Mingyang's subordinate, Big Head. He burst out laughing and shouted sarcastically, "Weren't you bold when you scolded others? Now that it's your turn, why are you so timid?" As soon as he said that, the other veterans burst out laughing. They didn't come to help, just standing there and watching the joke. Eventually, old Zheng ran to us. As soon as he saw his son's appearance, his face changed. He screamed and dashed forward. At this moment, I also found that something was wrong. No matter how timid little Zheng was, when a dried corpse pounced on him, he should have struggled a few times. However, after he was pounced on, he only screamed once. Then, he didn't make another sound. Although I couldn't see clearly under the moonlight, I could vaguely feel that the dried corpse holding little Zheng was different from the ones that had pounced on people earlier. I suddenly remembered what had happened and turned to look at the riverbank. The corpse that Zhao Yongquan had pinned to the riverbank was gone. As old Zheng was about to reach little Zheng, I dashed forward to stop him. However, old Zheng didn't go to save his son. Instead, he kneeled in front of the dried corpse, crying and begging old Gu to spare his son's life. I didn't know if the dried corpse could understand human language. However, as soon as old Zheng screamed, little Zheng's body slid out of the dried corpse's hand and slumped on the bodies of the other dried corpses. At this moment, people recognized that something was wrong. They all rushed to that side. When old Zheng saw his son fall to the ground, he didn't care about anything else. He dashed forward and hugged little Zheng. However, at first glance, he burst into tears. I lifted my head to look at the dried corpse standing next to me. My heart sank. This corpse looked completely different from the other dried corpses. Black smoke hovered around its body, and its dried face seemed to be fuller than the other dried corpses' skulls. Moreover, I could vaguely see two fangs in its pitch-black mouth. It was the appearance of the black zombie. In the legends, the black zombie was extremely strong and invulnerable. It liked to swallow people's blood. Since little Zheng had been hugged for a long time, I was afraid he had been killed. At this moment, before I could react, the black zombie lunged toward old Zheng. I wanted to go there and save him, but I didn't have the corpse-subduing talisman. If I went there rashly, I would only lose my life. While I was hesitating, Zhao Yongquan thundered. He didn't move, but he appeared in front of me in just the blink of an eye. He held a long sword in his hand and thrust it toward the black zombie. He was fast. Before the zombie could touch old Zheng, the long sword in his hand had stabbed the black zombie. However, after stabbing the zombie, Zhao Yongquan didn't look happy. Instead, he was frightened. The black zombie had a thick layer of something on its surface. His sword didn't harm it at all. We hadn't crossed the river yet, and old Zheng's safety was very important to us. Of course, Zhao Yongquan wouldn't just stand and watch the black zombie attack him. At this critical moment, Zhao Yongquan let out a loud shout. He took out a yellow talisman from somewhere and threw it at the black zombie. As soon as the talisman touched the zombie's body, it burst into flames and stopped the zombie's movements. Seizing this chance, Zhao Yongquan dashed forward and grabbed old Zheng. He turned around and ran toward the center of the river. The black zombie was a bloodthirsty and violent creature. After the yellow talisman stopped it, it became even more brutal. It chased after Zhao Yongquan. Zhao Yongquan didn't have the corpse-subduing talisman that could restrain the black zombie. At this moment, he just pulled old Zheng and ran. However, his speed wasn't fast, let alone the fact that he was carrying a person. As the black zombie was about to catch up with him, he suddenly turned and ran toward me. Chapter 58. When old Zheng was in danger and Zhao Yongquan went to save him, my impression of Zhao Yongquan had changed. I thought that although he was stubborn and arrogant, at least he had a conscience and morals. Who would have thought that he would bring trouble to me in just a blink of an eye? In terms of metaphysics, I was much weaker than Zhao Yongquan. If he couldn't deal with the black zombie, I couldn't do anything about it. He wanted to kill me by bringing the black zombie to me. The Taoists had the Mao summoning technique. They could cast talismans on their bodies and invite ghosts and gods to possess them. I had seen the Taoist priest who had joined hands with old He to fight the female corpse use the Mao summoning technique. Zhao Yongquan had just used the Mao summoning technique to carry old Zheng and run away. Although he was much slower than the black zombie because of old Zheng, he was still faster than ordinary people. At least, he was faster than me. As the black zombie was dashing toward me, I couldn't run away. I had to force myself to read the golden light divine incantation. Heaven and earth mystic sect, the root of all energies. Cultivate 1,000,000,000 tribulations to prove my divine powers. Inside and outside the three realms, the Tao reigns supreme. My body has golden light covering my body. See but not see, hear but not hear. Encompassing heaven and earth, nurturing all living beings. Recite it 10,000 times, my body has light. Guards of the three realms, 5 kings welcome. 10,000 gods worship, controlling thunder and lightning. The ghosts and demons were frightened, and the spirits and monsters lost their forms. Thunder and lightning, concealing the name of the thunder god. Insight and wisdom intersect, 5 energies surge. Golden light appears quickly, covering my body. The golden light divine incantation was a great incantation. It could be used to make talismans, hand seals, and even hand seals. However, with my current power, I could barely recite the incantation. As soon as I finished reading the golden light divine incantation, a golden light appeared on my body and covered me completely. In the next second, the black zombie tore through the air and pounced on me. Because of the golden light, the black zombie didn't directly touch my body. Instead, he touched the golden light first. This golden light was formed from the stellar energy of heaven and earth, and it possessed an unparalleled destructive power against all evil beings. The moment the black zombie's body came into contact with the golden light, a large amount of corpse chi emitted from it, and it was sent flying with a miserable shriek. I didn't have it easy either. Although I had blocked the attack, the strength of the black zombie's attack was too great. After he was sent flying, I was also knocked to the ground. I tasted something sweet in my throat and spat out a mouthful of blood. At the same time, the golden light on my body extinguished. If the dark zombie pounced on me again, I would have died here. I endured the pain in my chest. As soon as I fell to the ground, I quickly got up and held the magic compass in my hand. I was prepared to ask the snake spirit to help me escape when the black zombie charged at me again. This snake spirit was a snake spirit that had cultivated for many years when it was alive. Although its power had been greatly reduced because of the disappearance of the yin energy from the compass, it was still more than enough to help me escape. This magic compass was too precious. If I used it to escape, I would have to expose myself. However, I didn't have time to worry about that at this moment. The black zombie was burned by the golden light, and its tough body had many wounds. Corpse chi gushed out, which was the source of the dark zombie's power. It was obvious that it had been hurt badly. The dark zombie was hot-tempered, and at this moment it was even more enraged. After the corpse chi on its body extinguished the golden light, it screeched and stormed toward me again. Director Liu, who was standing not far from me, shouted for Zhao Yongquan to come and help. The fatty also ran toward me. I held the compass tightly in my hand, but I didn't call the snake spirit. I didn't want to expose the magic compass until the last moment. Just as Black Zombie was a few steps away from me and was about to pounce on me, Zhao Yongquan suddenly tossed out a slender stone-like object and muttered, "Suppress!" Then, the stone-like object quickly flew to the top of the black zombie's head and pressed down. I took a closer look. That slender stone-like object was actually a paperweight. It looked really small, but when it flew above the black zombie's head, it seemed like it was carrying a 1,000-kilogram boulder on its back. Its pouncing movements were stopped and it couldn't even fight. It fell face up into the river. I was startled. I looked at the small paperweight again. It was glowing with Tao energy. It was a magic tool. Although it wasn't a magical tool with a spirit like the compass, this kind of magical tool was still rare. It was a suppressive magical tool. The paperweight originally had the ability to suppress, and it had been nourished by Zhao Yongquan for many years. Although it looked like a small stone, it was no different from a 10,000-kilogram boulder to an evil being. Even the incomparably strong black zombie couldn't resist it. Zhao Yongquan was worthy of his title as the president of the Taoist Association in the city. He had casually taken out such a rare magical tool. After being pressed into the river, the dark zombie was unwilling to give up and struggled again. However, he couldn't get rid of the paperweight's suppressive power. He slowly laid there motionlessly. I finally let go of the magical compass and exhaled. Zhao Yongquan calmly walked in front of me and looked at me strangely. After a while, he opened his mouth and asked, "May I know who Mr. Zhou's master is? Is the divine incantation you just chanted one of the 8 great divine incantations, the divine golden light incantation?" The author of the death scripture wasn't written in it. Of course, even if it was written, I wouldn't say it. From Zhao Yongquan's expression, the divine golden light incantation wasn't simple. It was one of the 8 great divine incantations. I didn't know if Zhao Yongquan was sure, but I couldn't easily admit it. I shook my head and said, "This is only a protective incantation passed down by my master. As for who my master is an unworldly person, so it's inconvenient to divulge his name." My attitude was a bit cold, causing Zhao Yongquan's expression to become unhappy. He coldly snorted and said, "You and I are traveling together and I just saved your life. Mr. Zhou, you aren't even willing to reveal your master. Aren't you not giving me face?" This person's skin was really thick. I was angry, so I didn't care about his feelings and said with a mocking tone, "Dao Zhang Zhao, when you tried to shift the blame to me, you probably didn't think about our friendship, right?" Zhao Yongquan was speechless. After a moment of silence, he said, "Previously, you said that if I draw energy and touch these dried corpses, they will give birth to zombies. Although I didn't believe it at the time, I naturally believed you after they really gave birth to zombies. I thought that since you knew how to create zombies, you would naturally have a way to deal with it. Just now, the situation was dangerous. In order to save people, I asked you to block the zombie. Although you were injured, your life wasn't in danger. What does Mr. Zhou think is wrong?" After he said that, the surrounding gazes that were originally filled with sympathy for me disappeared. Even the fatty's resentful gaze became much calmer. Only I sneered in my heart. What he said sounded reasonable, but in reality, he was just twisting words and forcing logic. Feng Shui and Taoism came from the same source. Zhao Yongquan's cultivation base was much stronger than mine. I couldn't see through him, but he could see through me with just a glance. This black zombie was extremely powerful. If he didn't have a suppressive magic tool, he wouldn't be able to deal with this powerful black zombie. At that time, he directly shifted the blame to me. If I didn't know the golden light divine incantation, I'm afraid I would have been lying on the ground with little Zheng. If the golden light divine incantation wasn't so famous, I'm afraid Zhao Yongquan wouldn't have come to explain to me. Now, he was blaming me for being narrow-minded. When Director Liu saw our tense atmosphere, he proactively came to us and tried to smooth things over. Zhao Yongquan snorted and didn't want to argue with me. He turned around and returned to the front of the team. However, before he left, he stooped to look at the paperweight that was still suppressing the black zombie's body. He looked like he was in pain. As the black zombie wasn't dead yet, he didn't dare to take the paperweight away. He could only leave it here. When we got back, he would see if he could take it away. After persuading us, Director Liu went to old Zheng and comforted him. However, little Zheng was dead. The grief of losing his son wasn't something that could be soothed with just a few words. Old Zheng had agreed to take us to the decapitation gorge. But now, he stood up and carried little Zheng's body on his back. He was determined to go back. As things had come to this, Director Liu couldn't force him to stay. He had to pay more money and let old Zheng leave. As soon as old Zheng left, we didn't dare to linger. We hurried to gather the team and headed to the other side of the river. I didn't know why, but as soon as we took a few steps, the corpse in the river started to sway up and down. Moreover, the sway became bigger and bigger. We couldn't stand still. The fat man was the first one to react. He stooped to look at the river. In just a blink of an eye, his left pupil turned into a double pupil. He said in a low voice, "There's something at the bottom of the river." Chapter 59. When we reached the shore, one of Fan Jichao's veterans suddenly screamed. His body sank into the water and disappeared. Xiao He, the one who had tried to swim, also sank and disappeared. At that time, I suspected that there was a giant fish underwater. However, since we were far away, I couldn't see clearly, so I couldn't come to a conclusion. At this moment, that veteran was less than 10 meters away from me. He had disappeared without a trace. It couldn't be a water monster. Fan Jichao wanted to dive into the water to check, but Tang Mingyang pulled him back. "Let's cross the river first. It's clear that we have to give up on that veteran." Fan Jichao didn't have the heart to do that, but Chief Lu urged him to hurry. Eventually, Fan Jichao had to give up and climb to the shore. The corpses in the river were bobbing up and down. The veterans were agile. When they reached the riverbank, they just needed to grab the water plants by the table to get up. The fatty and I didn't have this ability. We had to rely on Fan Jichao and Tang Mingyang to pull us up one by one. When I got to the shore, the corpses in the river were like boiled dumplings. They were bobbing up and down. Some of the corpses were tossed into the air. They were connected to something that looked like a long rope. I didn't know how far they were going to go, but I couldn't see the end. At the bottom of the river, I heard a loud rumbling noise. It sounded like a house collapsing during an earthquake or a giant beast roaring. Although we didn't know what was down there, we all felt the danger. After we got to the shore, we hurried to retreat. When I was about to leave, I saw the fatty, who had just gotten to the shore, crawl toward the river again. He was shouting something, but the commotion at the bottom of the river covered his voice. I couldn't hear him clearly. I looked into the river and saw that Bai Ling was still in the water. The corpse under my feet couldn't stand anymore. Half of his body was in the water, and he was grabbing the water plants by the shore. His other hand was trying to reach up, but he couldn't reach the hand of the person on the shore. He was so anxious that his face was covered in tears. The fatty was also restless. He almost wanted to jump into the water to save Bai Ling. I pulled him back and prepared to read the 5 ghosts carrying spell to lift Bai Ling out of the water. However, before I could finish my chant, I felt the Yin energy around us rise. I stopped. The 5 ghosts transfer spell was used to summon 5 ghosts nearby to help. Normally, it would only attract some wandering ghosts, so it wasn't a big deal. However, there were so many soulless corpses here, so who knew how many ghosts were hiding in the surroundings? If a ghost with a high cultivation was attracted, then it wouldn't be saving people, but harming people. With such a delay, Bai Ling's body slid further into the river. Only her shoulders were still above the water surface. She was in a precarious situation. The floating corpses in the river were all thrown into the air. Only the seaweed-like things under their bodies were still hanging in the river. In the middle of the river, bubbles kept popping up, as if something huge was slowly drilling its way up from below. The fatty was sweating all over his body, and he was shivering. I wondered if he had sensed something. Diviners could see the mysteries of the heavens, and they were very sensitive to things in the dark. Even an ordinary person could feel the endless danger, let alone the fatty. However, his face was frightened, but he didn't want to give up on Bai Ling. He tried his best to reach out his hand to save her. Feeling helpless, I took out the compass one more time. I didn't care if I was exposed or not. I wanted to summon the snake spirit to save Bai Ling. But at this moment it was Zhao Yongquan again. He muttered something and formed a mysterious hand seal with his hand. Then, he stretched out his hand and waved towards Bai Ling. Bai Ling seemed to be pulled by an invisible hand as she jumped out of the water for a long distance. Then, Fatty and Tang Mingyang reached out to grab her at the same time and pulled her to the shore. When we reached the riverbank, Bai Ling's face was pale. she was still scared. She directly jumped into the fatty's arms and sobbed. The fatty didn't care about having tender feelings for the fairer sex. He pulled Bai Ling and ran away from the river. I followed behind him. While running, I turned to look at Zhao Yongquan. The hand seal seemed to have consumed a lot of his energy. After pulling Bai Ling up, he vomited blood, his face pale. My impression of him had changed a lot. Although he was arrogant and harsh, and his attitude toward me was strange, he wasn't a bad person. First, he saved old Zheng, and now, he saved Bai Ling. When we saved old Zheng, we could say that he wanted to take us across the river. However, saving Bai Ling was purely for the greater good. When we were around 100 meters away from the riverbank, another earth-shaking explosion arose from the other side of the river. We couldn't help but turn to look. The river suddenly emitted a golden light. A golden object slowly emerged from the middle of the river. When I saw the golden object, I felt as if something had hammered my chest. My vision darkened. Although I didn't faint, I didn't have the strength to run anymore. My legs softened and I slumped to the ground. The others weren't in a better state than me. They all fell to the ground. Tang Mingyang, Fan Jichao, and the other ordinary people had fainted. Only the fatty, Zhao Yongquan, and I opened our eyes. We absent-mindedly looked at the golden light in the river. Unexpectedly, Chief Lu didn't faint. He looked intoxicated as he looked at the golden light. His expression was different from ours. However, we didn't notice it. The golden light became thicker and thicker. After my eyes got used to it, I could see a massive golden head rising from the river. The tens of thousands of golden light beams were coming from this head. Apart from that, the head was also covered in thick and lush hair that extended outwards endlessly. At the end of each strand of hair was a corpse that was dancing in the air. The thing we saw below the corpse wasn't the seaweed. It was the head's hair. Each of the corpses was connected to the head's hair. It looked really strange. This golden head was really big. As it was shrouded in the golden light, it looked really majestic. It looked like an emperor of the human world. After the head emerged, it stopped moving in the middle of the river. The water under it didn't surge anymore. I couldn't tell if the head had a body or not. Just the head alone was so big that it occupied half of the river. If it had a body, how big would that body be? Before I could figure it out, the giant head moved again. Its eyes slowly opened, looking at us. The moment he opened his eyes, the few of us who were still conscious couldn't help but look at him. We blankly stared at his huge eyes. In that moment, I seemed to see the rising and falling of the sun and the moon, as well as the movement of the stars, in the eyes of the giant head. In the next second, the two giant eyes slowly closed, and the river began to surge. Shortly after, the golden head slowly sank to the bottom of the river. The corpses floating in the air also slowly sank. This time, they didn't cover the entire river. Instead, they formed a vertical line, slowly drifting downstream. After the head had disappeared for a long time, we slowly woke up and looked at each other. Our eyes were filled with endless shock. I asked the fatty, "Can you perform a divination to see the origin of this giant head?" The fatty hugged Bai Ling, who had fainted in his arms. He didn't think much and shook his head resolutely. "If you try to guess the heaven's secret, you will be devoured." I had to give up. I took 2 deep breaths to calm my wounds. When I was about to get up to check the others, I saw Chief Lu kneeling not far from me. He was on his knees, his entire body on the ground. He was muttering something in the direction of the river. I didn't know what he meant. When I was about to ask him, he stood up. Chapter 60. Perhaps it was because of the golden head, but I was very sensitive to golden things. I rubbed my eyes and lifted my head to look at Chief Lu. However, he didn't seem to care. He didn't look frightened or tired. Quite the contrary, he looked excited. He asked Zhao Yongquan and me to wake up the others. Since he didn't want to talk about it, I didn't ask further. Zhao Yongquan, the fatty, and I woke up the others. From a medical point of view, Fainting was a way for the human body to protect itself. I thought it would be troublesome to wake them up. Who would have thought that I just patted each of them gently, and they all woke up? However, after they woke up, they reacted strangely. They looked around and asked in surprise, "Hey, how did we get to the river bank?" The fatty and I looked at each other in surprise. After asking around, we found out that everyone who had fainted had forgotten about their last experience on the shore. They only remembered that they had encountered the black zombie on the way. After that, they couldn't remember anything else. Although I didn't know the reason, I felt that it was related to that giant golden head. Does that head have the power to make people lose their memories? I couldn't believe it. Those people had just glanced at the golden head. If it could make them lose their memories after just one glance, how terrifying was that golden head? We didn't mention the golden head. After Tang Mingyang and Fan Jichao's men rested for a while, Chief Lu asked them to set up tents and set up camp. The rest of us lit a bonfire and gathered around it to warm up. Although it was summer, the temperature difference between day and night was big in the mountains. Moreover, when we crossed the river, our clothes were wet. At this moment we could feel the cold air. At first, Zhao Yongkuan, and the others were a little nervous. We were worried that there would be ghosts around the river. However, after waiting for a long time, we didn't see anything strange. We slowly relaxed. Chief Lu and Zhao Yongkuan were talking in low voices. After the frightening scene, Bai Ling and the fatty's relationship had improved a lot. They didn't quarrel anymore. Instead, they gathered together and whispered to each other. From the looks of it, they had become friends. I was the only one left. I held a bottle of wine in my hand and sipped it to ward off the cold. I couldn't stop thinking about the giant golden head. I didn't know why, but when I looked at the golden head, I kept thinking about the red shadow. The golden head was huge, while the red shadow was thin. The face of the golden head had many strange phenomena, but I had never seen the face of the red shadow before. However, these two things that had nothing to do with each other kept appearing in my head. I couldn't understand why. Perhaps it was because of the red shadow, but I subconsciously grabbed the jade bracelet on my neck. Just as I grabbed the jade bracelet, Tong Tong's voice suddenly resounded in my mind. "Brother!" I was stunned. Tong Tong didn't come out of the jade bracelet. How could she talk to me directly? Without waiting for me to think clearly, Tong Tong said, "Xiao, she said that she has something to tell you. There are too many people here. Brother, can you go to a remote place and let Xiao she talk to you? The spirit snake is looking for me?" This was strange. Although Uncle Snake's spirit was like a pug every day because of Tong Tong, he never pretended to talk to me. As long as Tong Tong didn't appear, he would always call me uncle and only look up to the sky. Even when I asked him to save me in times of crisis, he was forced to agree through Tong Tong. Why did he suddenly take the initiative to look for me? I put down the bottle and excused myself to go to the toilet. I went to the forest far away and stood there for a while. After confirming that no one was following me, I took out the jade bracelet and the compass. I wasn't in a hurry to summon the snake spirit, so I called Tong Tong out first. After asking Tong Tong in detail, I found out that Tong Tong had cultivated a secret technique from the art of godhood. That was why he wasn't able to appear from the jade bracelet and was able to communicate with me directly. This was done through a soul contract. I was also interested. Tong Tong, can I talk to her directly in this situation? However, Tong Tong told me that with my current realm, I couldn't understand the source of the soul. That was why I could only communicate with her unilaterally. This made me feel discouraged. Speaking of which, Tong Tong had started to cultivate the art of godhood after she had followed me. Who would have thought that she had already comprehended the source of the soul? Tong Tong was a Yin soul, so it was easier for her to comprehend the source of the soul than a human feng shui master. However, she had reached this step in such a short time, which made me feel like a loser. In the end, Tong Tong comforted me. As long as she studies this secret technique, she can connect her 3 souls to my soul. Then, I can use this method to communicate with her. Her words made me even more embarrassed. It seemed Tong Tong didn't have confidence in me at all. However, I couldn't say anything. Comprehending the source of the soul was something I could only consider after I became a heavenly master. Tong Tong wasn't the only one who didn't have confidence in me. I didn't have confidence in myself, either. After talking with Tong Tong, I called the spirit snake out of the compass. As soon as it appeared, the spirit snake bowed to me and called me brother. It made my scalp tingle. I resisted the urge to kick it and tell it to stop farting. The spirit snake then used a polite and humble tone to ask me, "Do you want to go to the canyon in front of us tomorrow?" After I nodded, the spirit snake asked, "When we go to the canyon tomorrow, can I take you to a place?" I was surprised. "What's wrong with the spirit snake? Have you been here before?" The spirit snake's big head shook. "No, I haven't been here before." "Are you kidding me? If you haven't been here before, why did you contact Tong Tong and ask me to come here?" I didn't say anything and was about to call Tong Tong to beat him up. The snake spirit was anxious and told me the reason. He said shyly, "I haven't been here before, but today I felt the aura of a friend. He's in that canyon." "Friend?" I was bewildered. The spirit snake continued, "Although we aren't humans with the spirits of all living things, we have souls and know how to reproduce. When I was alive, I was like you humans. I had a few wives and concubines. The aura in this canyon belongs to one of my concubines. It's been so many years. I didn't expect to meet her here." The spirit snake's explanation was an eye-opener for me. Snakes were lascivious by nature. Moreover, he was a 1,000-year-old snake demon. He had reached the flood dragon stage when he was alive. It wasn't impossible for him to have such a past. However, looking at the spirit snake's sneaky appearance, I felt that he wasn't telling me something. He wanted to do something behind my back. However, as long as Tong Tong was here, no matter what he wanted to do, I could just call Tong Tong and teach him a lesson. I guessed he wouldn't have any evil thoughts then. I nodded and agreed to his request. I asked him to contact me through Tong Tong when he arrived at the canyon tomorrow. When I returned to the campsite, the large bonfires had already been extinguished. Everyone had returned to their tents to sleep. Only 2 people from Fan Jichao's group had stayed behind to keep watch. I greeted them and returned to the single tent that they had reserved for me. At midnight, I heard a deep and mysterious voice. It sounded like some Buddhist scripture, but it was different. I couldn't describe it. It didn't seem to be a human language. I quietly opened a gap in the tent and listened carefully. It seemed to be coming from Director Lu's tent. After a long day of traveling, Director Lu wasn't sleeping. He was chanting something. It was really strange. During this trip to Shenangjia, Director Lu had been hiding something that I couldn't see through. At first, I wasn't too worried. However, we had just set off, and we had already experienced so many strange and dangerous things. Now I was a little worried. However, it wasn't the time to retreat. I had to be more careful during the next part of the journey. It was a quiet night. Early the next morning, I was woken up by the cold. At midnight, I slept with the embers of the bonfire, so I didn't feel cold. However, in the morning, the temperature in the mountain had dropped to less than 10 degrees Celsius. Even though I was wrapped in a sleeping bag, I still felt cold. When I walked out of the tent, I saw that everyone was up. Bai Ling was arranging breakfast for the veterans. He looked refreshed. I guessed he had gotten over the fear from last night. The fatty foolishly followed behind Bai Ling. They looked like they were in love with each other. It seemed they were progressing fast. After breakfast, Director Lu energetically called for people to continue their journey. I purposely stared at Chief Lu for a long time. I noticed that his face was rosy, and he seemed to be in good spirits. I couldn't understand why he was so energetic today. Yesterday, he had been muttering in the tent, and I guessed he hadn't slept at all. I couldn't help but feel excited. Perhaps it was because we had experienced the terrifying events last night, but we had become bolder. When we set off to the decapitation gorge that old Zheng had mentioned, no one objected. On the way, I was also excited. This time, I had agreed to come with Director Liu because I wanted to visit more mountains and rivers to find good geomancy and dragon veins. This gorge had the best geomancy I had seen so far. If I wanted to find traces of a dragon vein, this gorge was the most likely place. I couldn't help but feel excited. However, as we got closer to the gorge, my excitement disappeared. I was puzzled. This gorge had good geomancy. It was obvious that it was a place to gather wind and gather energy. The yin and yang energies should be balanced. However, as we walked closer, I found that the yin energy in the gorge was really thick. The further we walked, the colder it became. I looked at the fatty and Zhao Yongquan. Their faces didn't look much better. However, we didn't rashly talk. Compared to the river that was full of corpses yesterday, this gorge was just a little thicker with yin energy. It wasn't a big deal. When we finally entered the gorge, I felt that something was wrong. The yin energy here was so thick that it made people shiver. Even when the red shadow touched me, I didn't feel this cold. Right at this moment, there was a turn in the front of the gorge. Before I could reach the place, I heard Fan Jichao, who was walking in the front. He had just turned around and screamed. However, his voice stopped halfway. It sounded really strange. Our faces turned serious and hurried to follow him. When we turned the corner and saw the scene in front of us, all of us opened our eyes wide. We couldn't help but scream. In the wide and long valley, a stream of people was lined up neatly and slowly moving forward. It looked like an army, but there were old and young people among them. Everyone seemed to be floating, and their faces were filled with incomparable empty expressions. Not a single sound could be heard as they moved forward. They weren't people. They were an army of ghosts. Chapter 61. The eyes of those ghosts weren't scary or malicious. They just calmly looked at us, empty and numb. Tang Mingyang, Fan Jichao, and the others were scared out of their wit. They just stood there, not daring to move. Bai Ling paled. She couldn't help but pull the fat man's arm. Her voice trembled as she asked, "What? What are those?" The fat man didn't look good either. After a long moment, he said in a gloomy voice, "They're ghosts. They're what we usually called ghosts." Bai Ling's face paled even more. She shrank into the fat man's body. Not only were Bai Ling and the other ordinary people scared, but Zhao Yongquan and I didn't look any better than them. We had seen ghosts before, and we knew that there would be ghosts nearby. However, we had never thought that there would be a whole canyon filled with ghosts. I lifted my head to look into the distance, and my scalp went numb. How many ghosts are there? 20,000? 50,000? There were so many people in the canyon that we couldn't even count them all. At first, those ghosts just calmly looked at us. However, gradually, they started to move. They didn't line up in front of us anymore. Instead, they slowly moved toward us. Their speed was slow, but soon, the straight line disappeared. What replaced it was a huge group of ghosts that we couldn't see the end of. They slowly moved toward us. We shouldn't stay here for long. Zhao Yongquan reacted quickly. He waved his hand and said, "Everybody, get out of this canyon." As soon as he said that, a stuttering voice came from behind us. "SS, there are some behind us too." We turned around and saw that it was true. We didn't know when, but a group of ghosts had gathered behind us. They looked at us with numb eyes and slowly walked toward us. The ones in the front were only a dozen meters away from us. Being attacked from both the front and the back, the frightened crowd panicked. Tang Mingyang's men took out their weapons from their backpacks and pointed at the ghosts in front of them to boost their courage. I hadn't seen them carry weapons before. Now I saw that Tang Mingyang, Fan Jichao, and the other leaders were holding guns. However, after taking out their weapons, their expressions did not change much. The bodies of these ghosts were blurry to begin with. Without even trying, they knew that guns would not be very effective against them. As the ghost approached, the gap between us became more and more hilarious. One of Tang Mingyang's subordinates couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled the trigger and shot a magazine of bullets. The result was the same as we had imagined. The bullets directly went through the ghosts' bodies, and they didn't do anything to us. The ghosts continued to walk toward us. Zhao Yongquan finally spoke. He first stopped Tang Mingyang's men from shooting, then turned to the fatty and me. "I'll guard the front, you two guard the back. Guard as long as you can." Even though I held a grudge against him, it was obvious that this wasn't the time to argue with him. I nodded in silence, called the fatty, and walked to the back. At this moment, Bai Ling was still holding the fatty's hand and didn't want to let go. The fatty hesitated for a while, then got rid of her hand and told her to be careful. Then, he quietly followed me. When we were ready, the ghosts in the front and the back had forced us to a small, empty space that was around 40 to 50 square meters. Zhao Yongquan shouted, "Attack!" Then, he read the Mao summoning incantation. He swung his steel sword and cut the first row of ghosts. The ghosts were as fragile as a piece of white paper in front of Zhao Yongquan's steel sword, which contained his Dao energy. The moment Zhao Yongquan's opponent appeared, I threw the yellow talisman I had prepared in my hand. I slowly accumulated these yellow talismans while practicing talisman making during my years in university. There are evil-breaking talismans, pure yang talismans, and so on. All of these talismans contain strong yang energy, and they have a miraculous effect on ghosts. Each talisman I threw out was like a grenade. They exploded the moment they touched the bodies of the ghosts, killing all the ghosts in the vicinity. When I took action, the fat man also took action. He threw the 3 shiny copper coins in his hand. They didn't look fast, but as soon as they touched the souls, they scattered them. After circling around the souls, the coins would automatically spin and fly back to him. It was a marvelous trick. I had to admit that these souls were really weak. After we took action, a large number of them were killed. However, as long as we killed one group, another group would come. When the yellow talismans in my hand were about to be used up, I lifted my head to look into the distance. The army of ghosts didn't seem to have an end in sight. The number of ghosts seemed to be more than I had expected. If we continue to consume our qi of the way endlessly, we will not be able to solve the problem. The qi of the way in our bodies is limited, while the number of dark souls is almost infinite. When we run out of qi of the way, we will not be able to save others. Should he call Tong Tong out? I started to think about this. Facing such a large number of ghosts, even if I called Tong Tong, I wasn't sure if he could swallow or drive them away. However, with Tong Tong here, I could guarantee that these ghosts wouldn't dare to attack us. While I was hesitating, Zhao Yongquan's voice came to me again. He asked everyone to retreat to the corner of the valley. There was a narrow call that was around 10 square meters wide. It was just big enough for all of us to hide in. After Chief Lu brought the ordinary people to hide, Zhao Yongquan, the fatty, and I also eliminated the ghosts in front of us while retreating. After we squeezed into the call, Zhao Yongquan swung his sword in a circle, dispersing all the ghosts in front of us. Then, he quickly took out a small yellow paper figure and threw it on the ground. He chanted a mysterious spell, and the small figure, which was only as tall as a finger, quickly grew bigger. In the end, it became a giant that looked like a city wall, blocking the entrance of the colonel. This was a very advanced Dao technique. Although the yellow paper doll was just an illusion, it contained a supreme Dao Qi. If a ghost touched it, it would be destroyed. It would not be able to break through the yellow paper doll in a short amount of time. Finally, we were out of danger. Everybody heaved a sigh of relief. The fatty and I slumped to the ground and didn't want to move anymore. To be honest, when we were dealing with those ghosts, I didn't consume a lot of energy. I had to rely on the power of the talismans. Although I didn't consume a lot of energy physically, I was mentally exhausted. Besides the thick energy on their bodies, those ghosts didn't have much attack power. However, their empty, numb eyes kept gazing at me, which gave me a lot of pressure. Although the ghosts were blocked outside, I still felt scared when I recalled those eyes. Although we had temporarily dodged a calamity, we all grimaced. The yellow paper giant could stop those ghosts for a while, but what would happen after that? No one spoke, but almost everyone's heart was filled with despair. There was no other way. If we wanted to escape, we could only rely on Tong Tong. I took out the jade bracelet. When I was about to call Tong Tong, the fatty, who wasn't far from me, angrily asked, "What are you doing?" I was stunned. Before I could turn around, I felt a cold sensation on my neck. An ice-cold sword was placed on my neck. Zhao Yongquan was the only one holding a long sword. I took a deep breath and suppressed my anger. I asked, "Taoist priest Zhao, what do you mean?" Zhao Yongquan coldly replied, "Nothing. I just want Mr. Zhou to lead the ghosts away. Then, I'll take the others and run away from here." His voice was cold, without a trace of emotion. Before I could say anything, the fatty quickly walked to my side and said to Zhao Yongquan, "Martial Uncle Zhao, we can think of another way to escape. What you're doing is too much." Zhao Yongquan didn't move. He shook his head and said, "There's no other way." The fatty was silent. Zhao Yongquan and his master were friends. That was why he called him Martial Uncle Zhao. However, it was also because of this that he knew how strong Zhao Yongquan was. Chapter 62. People are creatures of profit. The more dangerous the situation is, the less people will talk to you about morality. I sat there and didn't move. The fatty's face became colder. After staying silent for a while, he said to Zhao Yongquan, "If you force him to go out, will he be willing to lead the spirits away? Moreover, there are so many spirits. Even if he is willing, he doesn't have the ability." Zhao Yongquan shook his head. Although spirits have intelligence, they act according to their instincts. A feng shui master is enough to attract the spirit's attention. With his ability, he won't die in a short time. Naturally, he can lead all the spirits away. As for whether he is willing or not, it won't be up to him. No one is willing to wait for death. His voice was calm. It was obvious that he had calculated my thoughts. The fatty was helpless. He looked at me one last time and gritted his teeth. "All right, since you want someone to lead the spirits away, isn't it better to have two people? I'll go too." "No. No." As soon as he said that, Chief Lu and Bai Ling stopped him at the same time. The fatty, however, remained unmoved. He directly walked over and stood beside me. He then said to Zhao Yongquan, "If I don't return this time, I reckon that my master won't let this matter rest. Martial Uncle Zhao, you must be prepared." The fatty's voice was cold. Although his tone was calm, it was threatening. It seemed that the fatty's master wasn't ordinary. Even Zhao Yongquan was afraid of him. Then, he pulled me out of the room. Bai Ling ran over and grabbed the fatty's arm. She begged Zhao Yongquan, "Taoist Zhao, I'm begging you. Don't force them out." Chief Lu finally spoke. "Let's calm down and think about it." However, Zhao Yongquan didn't move. He said stiffly, "I can't stop those spirits for too long. Either you send someone to lead the spirits away, or we all wait for death." Everyone quieted down. Bai Ling gritted her teeth and grabbed the fatty's arm. "I'll go too." Now, it was the fatty's turn to persuade her. At this moment, I pushed Zhao Yongquan's sword and stood up. I smiled at the fatty and said, "You two don't need to fight. Just stay here. I'll go alone. It's just a bunch of ghosts. We don't know what will happen." Then, I didn't wait for the fatty to reply and directly walked toward the yellow paper doll. When I arrived in front of him, Zhao Yongquan cast a spell. The yellow paper doll shrank a little, leaving a small gap for me to escape. I turned around and looked at Zhao Yongquan, gritting my teeth. "Taoist priest Zhao, we'll meet again." Zhao Yongquan still had that calm expression on his face as he lightly said, "Don't resent me. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for being too weak. Seeing the fatty break free from Bai Ling and run toward me, I didn't say anything. I sneered at Zhao Yongquan and walked outside. As soon as I got out, the yellow paper effigy behind me expanded and blocked the entrance of the call one more time. At the same time, the ghost outside came to me. His cold and gloomy aura covered me. I didn't use my Tao energy. I just held the jade bracelet on my chest and called Tong Tong out. As soon as she came out, Tong Tong lifted her head and saw the endless army of ghosts. She said in surprise, "So many people." As soon as she said that, the ghosts that were squeezing toward me frantically retreated, as if they had seen something terrifying. Looking at the ghosts' actions, I heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed I was right. These ghosts were afraid of Tong Tong. As long as Tong Tong was here, I could at least guarantee my safety. Now, I could take Tong Tong and leave this place, letting the ghost army continue to besiege Zhao Yongquan's group. However, after thinking about it, I felt that I shouldn't do that. After all, the fatty was also there, and there were other innocent people. I wouldn't feel guilty if I killed Zhao Yongquan, but if I killed the others, I wouldn't be able to convince myself. With that thought in mind, I asked Tong Tong, "Can you swallow all the ghosts here?" After hearing the word swallow, Tong Tong instinctively frowned. However, she understood the situation. She didn't say that she didn't want to swallow them. After thinking for a while, she shook her head at me. "If there were only a few of them, I could. But there are too many of them." Tong Tong's words weren't out of my expectations. However, I didn't want to kill the others, and I couldn't leave by myself. Did I have to go back and call the others? Then, I would use Tong Tong's power to scare the ghosts and take everyone away? If that was the case, it was hard to say whether Zhao Yongquan would appreciate it or not. However, he would find Tong Tong's special ability. Once he was out of danger, perhaps he would become the next Professor Deng. I didn't want to give up. "Tong Tong, if you swallow as many ghosts as you can, how many ghosts can you kill?" Tong Tong thought for a while. "I can only swallow 1/10 of the ghosts in front of me." I was a little discouraged. It was meaningless to swallow 1/10 of the ghosts in front of me, let alone 1/10 of the ghosts in front of me. The canyon was full of ghosts, and I didn't know how many more there were. While I was in a dilemma, Tong Tong suddenly said, "Brother, if you want to kill all of them, I think there's another way." "What?" When I heard that, I cheered up. "What is it?" Tong Tong said, "The space inside the jade bracelet is really big. The place where I'm staying is big enough to store all of them. As long as we put them in there, it's the same as killing them." My eyes brightened. The jade bracelet could store ghosts. Tong Tong had told me that it was really big, but I didn't know the details. I thought it was just as big as a palace. That was why I didn't think of this method. Now, Tong Tong said that it could store all the ghosts in front of me and still have room to spare. However, not long after I was happy, I thought of another problem. I asked Tong Tong, "If we want them to enter the jade bracelet, we have to get their permission." "I'm afraid," Tong Tong smiled and said, "there's no need. I have a way." In the past, Tong Tong only had the basic abilities of ghost. But now that she had practiced the godhood technique, I didn't know what kind of abilities she had. It was the same as the last time when she could communicate with me without getting out of the jade bracelet. Tong Tong's abilities surprised me more and more. I exhaled in relief and took out the jade bracelet. I asked Tong Tong to find a way to store all the ghosts in there. Tong Tong received the jade bracelet. I didn't know what she was mumbling, but the jade bracelet glowed and the ghosts in front of us disappeared. After storing a batch of ghosts, Tong Tong walked forward and cast another spell. Another batch of ghosts disappeared. Then, the two of us walked out of the valley and collected the ghosts along the way. At first, I calculated the number. But later on, when the number reached tens of thousands, I was confused. I stopped counting and just followed Tong Tong. After walking for 1 hour, we finally reached the other exit of the canyon. We collected the last batch of ghosts into the jade bracelet. After collecting all the souls, Tong Tong's face was full of vigor. She didn't look tired at all. She handed the jade bracelet back to me. After receiving it, I thought for a while and told Tong Tong, since there are so many ghosts in the jade bracelet, when she cultivates here, she can swallow all of them to strengthen herself. Although Tong Tong was kind and had an instinctive resistance to swallowing other ghosts, Zhao Yongquan's words had touched me. He was right. He had forced me to come out because I was too weak. If I were stronger than him, he wouldn't have dared to threaten me. Tong Tong was a ghost child that everyone in the metaphysics world coveted. If she wasn't strong enough, someone like Professor Deng or Zhao Yongquan would appear. At that time, her life would be worse than death. After listening to me, Tong Tong hesitated. She pondered for a while and then said with a pitiful face, "Brother, I'll listen to you. But there are good and bad ghosts. I'll only swallow the bad ones. Is that okay?" I smiled and rubbed her head. Of course. After collecting all the souls, I was thinking about whether I should go back or not. The snake spirit suddenly crawled out of the compass. It has sensed the aura of its concubine. She's not far from here. It wants me to take it there. Chapter 63. Humans were the spirits of all living beings. They were born with 3 souls. Even the most ordinary people were born with intelligence that other creatures did not have. They could be said to be favored by God. Other animals only had heavenly souls and earthly souls. Although they had some intelligence, they could only be regarded as stupid and ignorant compared to humans. Fortunately, all living beings had the desire to advance. Most animals with only 2 souls had a long lifespan that was difficult for humans to seek. After a long period of cultivation, these creatures also had the possibility of cultivating a natal soul under certain coincidences. As long as they cultivated a natal soul and completed the 3 souls, there was not much difference between these creatures and humans in other aspects, except for the difference in body shape. Moreover, it was rumored that some creatures with profound cultivation could even get rid of the shackles of their physical bodies after breaking through some barriers of heaven and earth. They could transform into humans and be no different from humans. Of course, this was something that only an extremely small number of living beings could achieve. Moreover, during this process, they had spent countless years and experienced endless suffering. When they took human form, they already possessed great power, and this was something that was very difficult for humans to possess. The snake spirit was a 1,000-year-old snake spirit when it was alive. Although it was still a long way from transforming into a human, after cultivating a natal soul and completing the 3 souls, all of its behaviors were no different from humans. Moreover, creatures who embarked on the path of cultivation yearned for the life of humans. In ancient times, marrying wives and concubines was naturally not something too unimaginable. The snake spirit was very excited along the way. I could understand. After its death, it had been living in this magical compass for many years. Occasionally, it could recall its extraordinary years in the forest. Finally, it was lured out of the compass and met the pupil demon king. During this period of time, its life could only be described as pitiful. Now it could finally see its old friend. It was not about being a wife or concubine, but it was an old friend who had seen its glory in the past. Humans were eager to find their place in the memories of others, and other creatures were no exception. The tiger that had fallen to the ground was definitely eager to see the little squirrel that had been submissive to it in the jungle. The snake spirit that was now trapped in the shallows was naturally eager to see the little concubine that had been clingy to it in the past. This was the same logic. The spirit snake led us to a rocky beach at the exit of the canyon. It flicked its thick tongue back and forth. It flicked twice to the left and twice to the right. Eventually, it confirmed a direction. Its giant body floated in the air. It opened its mouth and shouted, "Wee wee wee wee, it's Brother Long. Where are you? Come out and see me." The spirit snake screamed many times in one breath, but nothing happened. I felt bored watching the show. Did you find the wrong place? Do you want to go somewhere else to look for it? I asked. The spirit snake shook its head at me, looking angry. This time, it cursed loudly. Wee wee, you little bee asterisk tc. Hurry up and come out for Brother Long. If you don't come out when I find you, I'll teach you a lesson tonight. His sudden change in style had a miraculous effect. On the rocky beach in front of him, a black gas suddenly spurted out, and a small snake about the thickness of a thumb popped its head out from a crack in the rock. It looked at the snake spirit in midair, and then with a whoosh, it turned into a white light that the naked eye couldn't see clearly, and almost instantly rushed to the front of the snake spirit. Its two ruby-like snake eyes stared fixedly at the snake spirit, and after a long while, it let out a soft voice with a sobbing tone. Brother Long? You heartless thing. Is it really you? I thought someone was pretending to be you. You bastard, it's been so many years. Where have you been? Then, the little snake with a white body and red eyes slithered to the snake spirit's giant head. Its small body coiled around the snake spirit's head. However, the snake spirit's black head was just an illusion. The little snake's body directly pierced through its head. Brother Long, why are you? Are you already dead? The little white snake turned pale with fright. It stared at the snake spirit for a while. Then, its small body arched, and a large amount of black gas emitted from its back. It looked really scary. The snake spirit smiled cheekily. Its tongue was bigger than the little snake's body. It licked the little white snake's body and said in a mushy tone, Little wee wee, let's not talk about this. Why did you come here? Did anyone bully you while Brother Long wasn't here? The little white snake ignored him and suddenly turned to look at me. It asked angrily, Brother Long, did that human kill you? Looking at your current appearance, did he capture you to be his weapon spirit? I couldn't help but feel a chill run down my spine as the little white snake's red eyes stared at me. It felt as if the surrounding temperature had dropped by a few degrees. This little white snake was much stronger than Zhao Yongquan. After being stared at by her, I didn't even have the slightest thought to resist. I only felt incomparably frightened. Fortunately, the snake spirit hurried to stop her. After explaining for a long time, the little white snake shifted her gaze away from me. Then, she coquettishly told the snake spirit about what had happened to her all these years. According to her, after Brother Long had disappeared, she had searched everywhere but to no avail. Then, a human Taoist priest had found her and chased after her. She had fled all the way here and had been hiding in this canyon for all these years. Then, the little white snake seemed to recall something. She hurriedly said, The souls of the dead will come soon. The snake spirit should hide with her. When Tong Tong and I had collected the souls, the snake spirit had been in the compass. It didn't know what was going on. It asked the little white snake, What souls of the dead are you talking about? The snake spirit stuck out its tongue disdainfully when it learned that it was just a bunch of human souls. Aren't they just ghosts? They're very nutritious. What's there to be afraid of? I can eat 100 of them. The little snake's face didn't look relaxed at all. Instead, it said with fear, They are ghosts, but it's not just 100. There are at least 100,000 of them. The snake spirit was so scared that it almost fell from the sky. It grinned and said, What? 100,000? The little white snake nodded. The fear on its face didn't disappear. Then, it said, The reason why I've been hiding here all these years is because of these ghosts. Every day, I would secretly catch some to eat. This has been going on for more than 100 years. But no matter how much I eat, the ghosts still fill the entire canyon. I can't see the end of them. The snake spirit's huge head revealed a human-like fear. It looked around and shook its head. How could there be so many ghosts? I don't believe it. The little white snake was a little anxious. She shook her tail and black gas gushed out of her body. On her originally smooth head, there were 2 blood-red sarcomas. Then, she said, Brother Long, look. That year, I had just cultivated my natal soul. Now, look at me." Before she could finish her sentence, the snake spirit looked as if it had seen a ghost. It stared at her head in horror and said, "You're going to transform into a flood dragon. Or 2 horns. It's only been 100 years. How could it be?" The little white snake nodded and excitedly said, "It's because I've eaten ghosts for more than 100 years. Now, do you believe me? Those ghosts are weak, but there are too many of them. We should hurry and hide." This time, the snake spirit didn't say anything else. However, it pointed at me and said, "I'm your friend. You should take me and hide with you." At first, I wanted to tell them that there were no more ghosts. However, after hearing the little white snake say that it wanted to take us to hide, I was a little curious. Why would it take a living person like me to hide in this rocky area? The little white snake asked us to follow her. After a few steps, the little white snake's body suddenly surged with black gas, directly covering me and the snake spirit. Then, my vision turned black. When I could see again, I found myself in a huge, simple, and crude cave. I looked around with interest. Just now, when the black air wrapped around my body, I felt a fluctuation similar to that of a feng shui formation. The little white snake unexpectedly had the ability to arrange formations. Hidden in the middle of this rocky beach was a big cave. After entering the cave, the little white snake took the snake spirit to another cave, leaving me here alone. The snake spirit couldn't leave the compass too far, but I didn't mind it. I sat there and slowly considered if I should meet up with the fatty and the others. I stayed here for more than half an hour. Then, the snake spirit and the little white snake reappeared. The little white snake stayed far away from me and didn't come over. The snake spirit swaggered in front of me. I felt strange. Recently, the snake spirit had been as obedient as a grandchild in front of me. Why did it suddenly return to its previous arrogant manner? Before I could figure it out, the spirit snake ran to me and said proudly, "Kiddo, do you see anything different about your Uncle Snake Immortal?" I focused my eyes and saw that the remaining Een energy in the snake spirit's body had disappeared. It had become a pure snake spirit. I guess the white snake spirit had used some tricks. Before I could say anything, the snake spirit laughed and said, "All right, hand over the compass to me and release that little girl. Let this Uncle Snake Immortal beat her up. Then I'll let you go." Beat Tong Tong? Are you sure? I looked at the snake spirit and didn't understand. Chapter 64. After the spirit snake said that, the little white snake, Hui Hui, also came over. Her cold snake eyes stared at me and said, "Lowly human, you dare to bully my husband. Don't even think about getting out of here today." Although the little white snake was small, her murderous aura was really terrifying. I didn't need to fight to know that I wasn't her opponent. From her expression, I was afraid that she really wanted to kill me. Before I could say anything, the spirit snake awkwardly moved between me and the little white snake. He grinned at the little white snake and said, "Actually, you didn't bully me. Just beat him up and teach him a lesson. Why do you want to keep him here? He's just wasting our time tonight." His mischievous face angered the little white snake. She glared at him, then turned to me and snorted. "Hurry up and hand over the ghost girl that my husband mentioned. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite." "Yeah, hurry up and call her out. Otherwise, I won't be polite." The spirit snake rubbed his palms and looked like a fox exploiting the tiger's might. This fellow seemed to be born with the attribute of seeking death. I looked at his despicable appearance and tried to save him one last time. "Are you sure? I'm really going to call her. Stop talking nonsense. Hurry up." The spirit snake slapped his tail on the ground and glared at me. Fine, I couldn't stop those who seek death. I pouted my lips and took out the jade bracelet to call Tong Tong out. As soon as she came out, she saw the spirit snake. She giggled and said, "Hey, little snake, you're here too. Did you find your friend?" After she said that, she turned around and saw the little white snake on the side. Her eyes instantly narrowed into a line. She pointed at the little white snake and said to me happily, "Big brother, look, this little white snake is so cute." Seeing Tong Tong, the originally arrogant snake spirit subconsciously shrank back, but when it turned back to look at the little white snake, its courage rose again. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it said to Tong Tong, "Little ghost girl, let me tell you, Lord Snake Immortal, this snake immortal no longer has any baleful chi on my body. Come over obediently and let me beat you up, then we can forget about our past grievances, otherwise—" Before he finished speaking, the little white snake probably could not stand it any more. With a whoosh, it flew in front of Tong Tong and angrily said, "You are just a little ghost that is not even a spirit. How dare you take advantage of my husband when he is in trouble to humiliate him? You bitch, kneel down." After listening to her, Tong Tong turned to look at me in confusion. She sounded wronged and said, "Brother, this little white snake is so fierce." I fanned the flames on the side. "Actually, little white snake sis isn't fierce. It's mainly because little snake is bewitching her. If she doesn't get beaten up, she won't be obedient." Tong Tong agreed with my words. His little hand moved. It seemed he was about to hit the spirit snake again. At this moment, the spirit snake panicked. Then, he became strangely angry. "Why? You want to hit me? Now that my Hui is here, it's time for me to hit you." "No, it's time to hit both of you." The little white snake also chimed in. "You lowly maid, stand there and don't move. Let my husband vent his anger. If you dare to move, I'll swallow you." As she said that, the spirit snake's giant tail swept toward Tong Tong. Tong Tong was as willful as before. She didn't want to spoil the spirit snake. She grabbed her tail and threw him to the ground. After getting up, the spirit snake's mouth was crooked in anger. He couldn't even speak properly. He shivered and said, You dared to throw me. I'm so angry." Who knew that Tong Tong was even angrier than him? She pouted and said, "I told you that if you say dirty words again, I'll continue to hit you. You dared to say it again." At this moment, the little white snake couldn't hold back anymore. She dashed toward us. The spirit snake didn't stop her. He directly said to the little white snake, "Hui, let's attack together. Hit them both." Although he said that, he didn't dare to make a move. He just hid behind us. However, the little white snake wasn't careless. She slightly opened her mouth, revealing a bright red color. Black smoke surged from her body. It seemed she wanted to swallow us in one bite. Although I didn't know how the little white snake could swallow us both, I felt a great danger. I hurried to give the jade bracelet to Tong Tong and shouted, "Tong Tong, release the ghosts." No matter if it was Tong Tong or I, we weren't the little white snake's opponent. However, all the ghosts in the canyon were in the jade bracelet. From the little white snake's expression when she talked about the ghosts, I could tell that she was also afraid of them. Tong Tong didn't say anything. She followed my order and released the ghosts in the jade bracelet. In just a blink of an eye, countless ghosts filled the entire cave, surrounding us. On my side, the ghosts around us were afraid of Tong Tong. They tried to hide behind us. However, the spirit snake was different. Countless ghosts gazed at them with numb and empty eyes. They slowly but resolutely stormed toward them. The spirit snake was scared to death. It shivered and couldn't speak. The little white snake's complexion wasn't any better. It looked at us in shock and asked, "There are so many ghosts. Did you capture all of them?" Tong Tong waved the jade bracelet in her hand. Her eyes curved into a smile. Yeah. Little white snake's expression was still okay, just shocked and stunned, but the snake spirit next to her was full of despair when she heard this. Her body fell directly from mid-air to the ground, paralyzed there, motionless. Her eyes became almost as empty and numb as the surrounding ghost. She would probably never forget the fear of being dominated by the pupil demon king for the rest of her life. Tong Tong hopped over, reached out and patted the head of the snake spirit, and comforted him. "Don't be afraid, these ghosts listen to me. As long as you don't swear in the future and behave yourself, I won't let them bully you." The spirit snake looked numb. It seemed she didn't hear Tong Tong. After a while, she slowly got up. She turned to the little white snake and said, "Hui hui, I was wrong. I shouldn't have come to find you. I'm afraid I've implicated you. It's all my fault." Then, he didn't wait for the little white snake to reply. He walked to me with a weary face and returned to the compass. The little white snake turned to look at the ghosts around. She was a little reluctant. "Where do you want to take my husband?" I raised my hand and waved the compass. "The spirit snake is the treasure spirit of this compass. He can't leave this compass. I'll let him slowly cultivate inside the compass. If he has a chance to turn into a flood dragon, he might be able to reconstruct his body." The little white snake stared at me. She kept silent for a long time. Then, she angrily warned me, "Although she can't fight against so many ghosts, if I dare to harm the spirit snake, she will find a chance to swallow me." Although she threatened me, she just cared about the spirit snake. I didn't hate her and just nodded at her. Tong Tong seemed to like the little white snake a lot. With a sincere face, he asked the little white snake, "Do you want to go with us? That way you can stay with the spirit snake." Unfortunately, the little white snake was very vigilant against us. She was scared and resentful of Tong Tong. She didn't even bother with Tong Tong. She directly broke the formation of the cave and sent us outside. After we left, I told the little white snake, "If I have time, I will bring the spirit snake to see you again." Moreover, I gave her my house address. If she has time, she can go there to see the spirit snake. After bidding farewell to the little white snake, I started to think about where I should go next. Since I had stayed in the little white snake's cave for a long time, I wasn't sure where the fatty and the others had gone. However, after they found that the ghosts in the ravine had disappeared, they would leave as fast as they could. They wouldn't stay there for long. After thinking for a while, I decided to return to the ravine. If I could meet Chief Lu and the others, I would meet them. If I couldn't, I would just return the way I had come. I had encountered many dangers along the way, and I didn't know what would happen if I kept going. Although I wasn't scared, I was worried about the road ahead. I thought that I wouldn't have a chance to meet them. However, when I reached the valley where I had parted with them, I saw that they were still there. Chapter 65. When I returned to the canyon, I was prepared to leave in advance. However, they were still waiting for me there. It seemed they were waiting for me. Since we met again, I had no choice but to go there. When he saw me, Chief Lu looked excited. "What happened after you led the ghosts away?" Zhao Yongquan was sitting not far from Chief Lu. He was looking at me with a frightened face, but now he closed his eyes, his face calm. I looked at him and found an excuse to deal with Director Lu. "Why are you still here?" I asked him. Chief Lu told me, after the ghost left, they wanted to leave this place immediately. However, the fatty insisted on finding me. They sent people to search around, but they couldn't find the ghost. They decided to give the fatty some time to find me. After he said that, I recognized that the fatty wasn't in the crowd. Since I was worried that the fatty would run into some trouble, I asked Chief Lu to send Tang Mingyang's men to find him. Around half an hour later, the fatty ran back from outside, sweating profusely. As soon as he saw me, he rushed forward and hugged me. Then, he looked me up and down, left and right. He was puzzled. "Why did you come back without any problems?" Chief Lu and the others were ordinary people. When they saw so many ghosts, they were at most frightened. In reality, they didn't know how scary those ghosts were. Only me, the fatty, and Zhao Yongquan knew what would happen after being submerged in so many ghosts. That was why Chief Lu was happy to see me. He didn't think much about it, but the fatty was puzzled. Of course, I couldn't tell him about the jade bracelet and Tong Tong. I could only say that I didn't know. Not long after I got out of the canyon, the ghosts scattered. That was how I managed to escape. After exchanging greetings, Chief Lu urged us to continue our journey. we headed deeper into the canyon. Although encountering so many spirits in this canyon was unimaginable, in reality, it was just a daunting experience. No one was injured or killed, and it was much better than yesterday when they crossed the river. Therefore, no one gave up. Everyone regrouped and continued on their journey. On the way here, I didn't pay attention to the geomancy of this canyon because I wanted to collect the souls. This time, I had nothing to do, so I used the dragon-seeking and observing aura technique to find the location of the dragon vein from the terrain on both sides of the canyon. Dragon veins were easy to find in the terrain of the canyon. Soon, I found a clue. On the right side of the mountain ridge, I vaguely found a vein with the aura of a dragon vein. Although the aura of this dragon's vein was very shallow and wasn't considered very good among normal dragon's veins, what surprised me was that this dragon's vein had an embryonic aura. As for the embryonic breathing realm, it was the difference between an ordinary dragon vein and a true dragon vein. Although true dragon veins were not embryonic dragon veins, as long as they were bought by a true dragon, they would definitely have embryonic dragon veins. When I first saw the terrain of this canyon, I could only guess that there was a dragon vein, but I didn't have any illusions about a true dragon vein. Many geomancy masters couldn't find a true dragon vein in their entire lives. I didn't dare to hope that I could find one during my first time observing the dragon. But now it seemed that everything was destined. Perhaps I would have such a lucky chance. After seeing the embryonic dragon vein, I felt that this trip was worth it. Whether or not we could find the true dragon vein through this embryonic dragon vein, it was even more unbelievable than my best wish when I had agreed to join this trip with Chief Lu. Generally speaking, the mountain range that contained the true dragon vein wasn't very tall, but it was very long. This was a place where the embryonic dragon vein had just been found. Behind it there would be endless veins. The embryonic dragon vein was just a sign. Whether there was a true dragon vein or not, we had to see the ancestral dragon's branches. Although I was anxious to get to the front to see if there was a true dragon vein, the process of observing the dragon would be very beneficial to geomancy masters. I suppressed my impatience and deliberately slowed down to observe each vein of the dragon vein. This embryonic breath dragon vein might not be able to nurture a true dragon vein, but after observing it, my understanding of the embryonic breath dragon vein has deepened. If I have the opportunity to encounter another embryonic breath dragon vein in the future, I will have greater confidence in nurturing a true dragon vein. Since I had slowed down, I gradually left the team and walked to the back. The team in front of us stopped to wait for me once. When I caught up with them, Chief Lu came back to ask me about it. However, when I told him that I wanted to observe the terrain, he didn't say much. He just told me not to stray too far from the team. While Chief Lu was talking to me, Zhao Yongquan turned his head and looked at me. His eyes didn't have the disdain he had at the beginning. Vaguely, he was afraid of me. Compared to his fear towards me, I was even more vigilant towards him. Although Tong Tong had kept the spirits in his jade bracelet and could release them at the critical moment to defend against the enemy, the spirits didn't listen to my and Tong Tong's commands. This method could only frighten the enemy or trap them. It was impossible to take their lives. Moreover, this method had another limitation. If Zhao Yongquan wanted to kill me and ambush me, I wouldn't have a chance to release the souls. I wouldn't have the ability to resist him. After they were far away, I looked at Zhao Yongquan's back and became more vigilant. Along the way, I slowly observed the terrain of the mountain and the dragon vein. Unknowingly, I couldn't see the team anymore. I wasn't worried. Zhao Yongquan and the others were worried that the souls would come back. Only I knew that all the souls had been collected in the jade bracelet. We wouldn't encounter any other dangers in this canyon. We slowly moved forward. After more than an hour, I reached the rocky beach at the exit of the canyon. Then, I saw the people in front of me. They didn't move forward but stayed where they were. A group of people gathered and looked in front of them in fright. It seemed something was blocking their way. When I came closer, I saw that it was the little white snake that was blocking people's path. The little white snake's cave was on this rocky beach. I didn't know how Chief Lu's team had encountered this evil star. I looked at them from a distance. The little white snake was standing in front of them, its red eyes gazing at them. Black smoke twirled around its body. It was enraged and could attack them at any time. I had taken the snake spirit away, so the little white snake wouldn't be in a good mood for the rest of the day. Now that Chief Lu's team had encountered it, they would suffer a lot. I wanted to go and stop the little white snake, but at this moment I saw Zhao Yongquan leap over the crowd. He held his steel sword and walked toward the little white snake. It seemed he wanted to attack it. Seeing this, I retracted my foot that I had taken a step forward. When I came into contact with the little white snake earlier, although we didn't fight, I could feel that it was definitely stronger than Zhao Yongquan from the little white snake's aura. Also, the little white snake had said that it was only one step away from becoming a flood dragon. After a snake turned into a flood dragon, its power was equivalent to a human heavenly master. In other words, the little white snake's current power was only one step away from that of a heavenly master. And from the power that Zhao Yongquan had displayed earlier, he could form hand seals, so he was at least in the three realms of earthly master: dragon-seeking, pressure point, and glory of consciousness. Earthly masters who had reached the glory of consciousness realm would have starlight in their eyes when they used Tao energy. I didn't notice this phenomenon on Zhao Yongquan's body before. Overall, he should be in the second layer of earthly master. He was an entire level away from the little white snake. He was an entire level away, yet he still took the initiative to attack. I admired his courage, but I didn't think he would end up well. I was pressured by him many times before and I almost lost my life. I wasn't a saint and I hated him a lot. It was just that I wasn't strong enough, so I had to swallow my anger. Chapter 66. The little white snake's body was small, and its eyes, mouth, and other parts were all red. The two red sarcomas on its head didn't look very obvious. Looking at its body, you could only feel that it was cute, but you couldn't feel its imposing manner. Zhao Yongquan guessed that he was also bewitched by its appearance. That was why he didn't hesitate to fight with it. However, when he wielded his steel sword and rushed forward, the little white snake hissed, and its aura immediately changed. As it hissed, the little white snake spat out a wisp of black air. At first, the black air was just a small wisp, just like the little white snake's body. However, in just a blink of an eye, that wisp of black air became a black cloud that even covered Zhao Yongquan's body. In the deep black air, Zhao Yongquan and the little white snake's bodies couldn't be seen. We could only hear the sounds of explosions. Not long after, Zhao Yongquan's body flew out of the black air and fell on the ground. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he was severely injured. After beating Zhao Yongquan back, the little white snake retrieved its black air and slowly crawled to the front of the crowd. It looked at Zhao Yongquan with disdain and said with its sharp voice, "A human feng shui master is just SOSO." After speaking, it turned to look at Chairman Lu and the others. There was not a trace of emotion in its cold snake eyes as it said, "How dare you humans barge into my mountain god valley? None of you will be able to escape today. Prepare to enter my stomach." Then, it stuck out its tongue like a human and licked the corner of its mouth. Even when it was threatening, the little white snake still looked very cute. However, after it had defeated the powerful Zhao Yongquan in just a blink of an eye, no one dared to think that it was cute anymore. On the contrary, because of its petite appearance, it was even more frightening. The crowd became restless and started to talk about the mountain god valley that the little white snake had mentioned. Then, they thought about the grandpa mountain god that old Zheng had told us about. I was also surprised. The grandpa mountain god that old Zheng had mentioned was so scary, but I didn't expect it to be this little white snake. While the crowd was talking, Zhao Yongquan stood up with his sword. His sinister eyes gazed at the little white snake. His left hand reached into his chest pocket and took out a red talisman. I was surprised. I didn't expect that Zhao Yongquan would have this kind of talisman. Although I didn't know what kind of talisman it was, the talisman that Professor Deng had taken out last time was already very powerful, let alone the talisman that Zhao Yongquan had taken out. The little white snake didn't seem to recognize the scarlet talisman. Seeing Zhao Yongquan's actions, it turned to look at him in disdain and said, "Human feng shui master, I wanted to eat you last. I didn't expect you to be so eager to die." Zhao Yongquan snorted coldly. "A little worm dares to boast. Today, I'll let you see the means of your Taoist grandpa." After saying that, he did not hesitate to form a profound hand seal, and then stuck the crimson talisman to his chest. At the same time, he chanted, "The Taishang descends upon me, the three pure ones aid me, the jade blood sword is born, Mao Shu, please succeed." As he spoke, his entire body swelled up, and his aura was fundamentally different from before. Back then, I had seen the Taoist priest next to Oldman he recite this spell, but I didn't understand it back then. Later on, as I studied feng shui, I gradually understood some of the Taoist spells. Only then did he realize that this Xian curse was not ordinary. The Taoist art of inviting reeds was one of the most commonly used and extremely powerful spells. When it was used, it could invite gods and ghosts to come to one's body, which was extremely powerful. The god summoning spell and the spirit possession spell among the people were also derived from the god summoning spell. The art of inviting reeds was divided into 3 levels. The lower level, the art of inviting reeds, could invite the ghost general of the underworld to possess one's body. This would grant one immense strength and long vitality, allowing one to fight against demons and ghosts. It was an extremely useful technique, and it was also the most commonly used technique by Taoist priests when they were subduing demons and devils. Because of the existence of the art of inviting reeds, ordinary Taoist priests would carry steel swords with them, which were completely different from the peach-wood swords that feng shui masters usually used. When we were besieged by the ghosts, I used the talisman, and Zhao Yongquan used the lower-level art of inviting reeds. Just now, when he used the steel sword to fight against the little white snake, he also used the lower-level art of inviting reed. Now, he used the red talisman and recited the Xian curse. He wasn't using the lower-level art of inviting reeds, but the middle-level art of inviting reed. The middle-level art of inviting reeds could invite ancestors and even ghosts and spirits to come to the mortal world. Not only would it grant one infinite strength and long vitality, but it would also grant a large amount of Taoist energy to the body. Depending on the spirit or spirit that was invited, sometimes it could increase one's strength by 1 realm for a short period of time. Forcibly increasing one's realm would sometimes bring about some negative effects, just like how the folk gods and goddesses used the half-baked spirit possession technique. After using it, people would become weak and even lose their lifespan. But in terms of power, the middle-level art of inviting reeds was definitely an extremely powerful Taoist technique. As for the upper-level art of inviting reeds, according to the legend, it could really be like what was recited in the Xian curse. It could invite the Taishang Laojun to possess the body and the 3 pure ones to protect it. However, this was only a legend. In reality, no one could use it. According to historical legends, the Ming dynasty's feng shui master, Lu Bowen, once used the upper-level art of inviting reeds to possess the body and asked the 3 pure ones to protect it. However, this was only recorded in the book, and its authenticity was still debatable. After using the middle-level art of inviting reeds, Zhao Yongquan was no longer as weak as before. With the steel sword in his hand, he rushed towards the little white snake. The little white snake didn't care and continued to spit out black gas, trying to envelop Zhao Yongquan again. This black gas was the Een energy that the snake had produced after devouring countless Een souls over the past 100 years. If an ordinary person touched it, their entire body would freeze and die. Even if it was a cultivator, if they came into contact with this black gas, their entire body's Tao energy would be quickly consumed. Previously, when Zhao Yongquan used the lower-level art of inviting reeds, he was easily defeated because the black gas had consumed a lot of his Tao energy. This time, the little white snake used the same trick, but it didn't have the same effect. Zhao Yongquan swung the steel sword in his hand and used only one slash to cut the black gas that the little white snake had spat out into 2 halves. Then, he looked at the little white snake and snorted coldly. His face was extremely arrogant, as if he was really possessed by a god. Seeing this scene, I felt a chill in my heart. I was afraid that Zhao Yongquan's strength was much stronger than what I had expected. The little white snake was also startled, but it quickly became angry again. It opened its small red mouth and let out another sharp hiss. Along with this hissing sound, the 2 extremely small red sarcomas on its head seemed to have grown a bit bigger. Its entire body looked like a small white dragon with 2 horns. Seeing this scene, Zhao Yongquan's face became serious. However, his godlike arrogant expression didn't disappear. He swung the sword in his hand and slashed at the 2 horns on the little white snake's head. In the Book of Changes, the 9 and 5 lines of the Qian hexagram said, "Dragons follow the clouds and tigers follow the wind." The flood dragon's innate talent was water. Although the little white snake hadn't become a flood dragon yet, it had already understood the flood dragon's innate talent. Its small red mouth opened and a pure black water spurted out towards Zhao Yongquan's steel sword. Almost at the moment when the 2 collided, the steel sword in Zhao Yongquan's hand directly melted. Only the sword hilt was left in his hand. His body quickly retreated. In the end, the black water that the little white snake spat out was not willing to give up. It chased after Zhao Yongquan and went straight for his face. In front of this black water, the long sword that contained Taoist qi instantly disappeared like a block of ice under the scorching sun. Not to mention Zhao Yongquan's mortal body. As long as he was touched by this black water, he would definitely die in an instant. At this critical moment, Zhao Yongquan used his hand to fiercely hit his chest and spat out a large amount of blood mist. Then, his mouth was full of blood and he chanted an extremely mysterious incantation. Following his voice, the blood mist in the air didn't dissipate. Instead, it gradually condensed together and formed a talisman made of blood. This was the Taoist Jade Blood Talisman. It was rumored that this Jade Blood Talisman consumed 10 years of lifespan. Its power was extremely terrifying. Chapter 67. As the blood that Zhao Yongquan had spat out turned into a talisman, the black water that white snake had spat out also flew in front of him, colliding with the blood-colored talisman. The black water was pure black, and it contained an extremely cold aura. Even though I was standing far away, I could still feel the coldness in the air. However, when the black water with such frightening power collided with the ordinary-looking blood-colored talisman, it was almost instantly wrapped up by the blood-colored talisman. The blood-colored talisman seemed to contain an extremely high temperature. After the black water was wrapped up, it quickly evaporated into a black gas and dissipated in the air. At this time, although the blood-colored talisman had dimmed a lot, it still had some power left. It flew towards White Snake, and when it got close to its body, it turned into a blood-colored Taoist sword and slashed at White Snake's head. After that, the blood-colored Taoist sword finally used up all its power and dissipated in the air. White Snake, who was about to transform into a Jiao, was 1 level higher than Zhao Yongquan in terms of power. However, Zhao Yongquan's endless attacks, and he had even used up 10 years of his lifespan to use all kinds of magical Taoist technique. In the end, Zhao Yongquan's sword slashed at White Snake's head. The power of the blood-red talisman was extremely strong. I hastily looked at the little white snake's head. Fortunately, when it had turned into a sword, the power of the blood-red talisman didn't have much left. The sword didn't cut off the little white snake's head, but only left a bloody mark on its head. A string of scarlet blood flowed down from the wound. White Snake was severely injured, but Zhao Yongquan was even more miserable. Not only had his Taoist qi been used up, but he had also used up 10 years of his lifespan. Humans didn't have a long lifespan like other creatures. 10 years of lifespan was an extremely heavy price to pay, especially for a middle-aged man like Zhao Yongquan, who was over 50 years old. At this time, both sides didn't have any strength left, but relatively speaking, White Snake still had the upper hand. Zhao Yongquan had lost his Dao Qi, and his body was extremely weak. However, the little white snake had a strong body that humans did not have. Although it was injured, with its body that had been cultivated for hundreds of years, no one, including Zhao Yongquan, was a match for it. The little white snake spat out its bright red tongue and swept the blood that was left on the wound on its head. Suddenly, it let out a sharp hiss and stared at Zhao Yongquan viciously. Its mouth slowly opened, and it looked like it was about to pounce on Zhao Yongquan. I couldn't sit still anymore. Although I had a grudge against Zhao Yongquan, he was still my companion on this journey. Moreover, he was a human. I definitely couldn't sit back and let the little white snake devour him. I ran as fast as I could. At this moment, the little white snake had already leaped up. It opened its mouth at a terrifying angle and was about to pounce on Zhao Yongquan, who was many times bigger than itself. It was almost touching Zhao Yongquan's body. At this moment, Zhao Yongquan was like an arrow at the end of its flight. He no longer had any strength left to resist. It was a critical moment, and I didn't have time to take action. I could only shout, "Stop!" Normally, the little white snake was in an endless rage. It wouldn't be able to stop just because someone said, "Stop." However, it had been with me earlier today. At this moment it could recognize my voice. Moreover, it had been scared out of its wits by the ghost. When it heard my voice, it immediately left Zhao Yongquan's side and flew far away, vigilantly watching me. After it had flown away, Zhao Yongquan's eyes were still closed. After a while, he felt that something was wrong. He opened his eyes and looked at me with a puzzled expression. I didn't pay attention to him and looked at the little white snake. "Why did you stop us?" The little white snake didn't know my true power. Perhaps it was because I had collected all the spirits, making it think that I was very strong. Moreover, it was heavily injured. The little white snake was scared like a wounded rabbit. It had a pitiful and helpless expression and answered honestly, "I didn't know that you were with them." I waved my hand impatiently. "Since you didn't kill anyone today, I'll let you go. If I find out that you've killed people again, I will come here and tear you into pieces." The little white snake didn't dare to make a sound. It glanced at me and bowed to me. Then, it turned around and slithered away, disappearing into the pile of rocks. As soon as it left, everyone, including Zhao Yongquan, looked at me differently. Although the little white snake was badly wounded, it still had its power. However, it behaved so submissively to me. Everybody was confused. I didn't open my mouth to explain. I just calmly sat down on a rock next to me. Zhao Yongquan was the strongest person in our group. Now that he was severely wounded, everyone's complexion didn't look good. Director Lu walked over with a dark face. After he gathered us, he asked about Zhao Yongquan's condition. Zhao Yongquan didn't want to tell me more. "I need a few days to recover." Then, he looked at me. Besides the surprise at the beginning, he also looked cautious. I guessed he was worried that I would take revenge on him while he was wounded. I smiled disdainfully. I was just as calm as he was before. After discussing for a while, Director Lu decided to find a suitable place to set up camp outside the canyon. We would wait for Zhao Yongquan to recover before continuing our journey. It was a dangerous journey. On the way, Director Lu and the others had survived many dangers thanks to Zhao Yongquan's protection. Now that Zhao Yongquan wasn't here, they didn't dare to take risk. For the next few days, we set up camp not far from the exit of the canyon. Zhao Yongquan lived in seclusion. Even his meals were delivered to him by Director Lu's men. I knew he was guarding against me. However, after the little white snake had taught him a lesson, I felt much better. At this moment, I wasn't scared anymore. Fortunately, Tang Mingyang's men had brought a lot of rations. After a few days of delay, we still had enough energy to continue our journey. It was strange that after we got out of the canyon, the unimaginable things we had encountered disappeared. For the next few days, it was as if we were on a sightseeing tour. We leisurely moved forward in this primitive forest. We didn't encounter anything strange. At the same time, I had made great progress in finding the dragon vein. I didn't know if it was a coincidence, but after we got out of the canyon, the dragon vein I saw along the way was in the same direction as where we were going. It saved me a lot of trouble. As I moved forward, after the embryonic breath of the dragon vein, I found the ancestral dragon behind it. After a few days of moving forward and following the ancestral dragon's veins to the end, I could almost confirm that this dragon vein was definitely a true dragon vein that extended from the depths of the forest. From the fact that the dragon vein was in the same direction as where we were going, perhaps the fire god temple that Director Lu was looking for was also where the true dragon vein was hiding. After thinking about this possibility, I became even more excited. Since ancient times, how many people in the Geomaster realm had been able to find the true dragon vein? I didn't expect that I would be able to accomplish such a great feat if I could really find the true dragon vein this time. I would have to stay here for a while to complete the process of attracting the dragon. This would help me reach the second realm of the Geomaster realm. At that time, my power would be similar to Zhao Yongquan's. On the second day after I confirmed that there was a true dragon vein in front of us, as we moved forward, the primitive forest in front of us suddenly widened. It wasn't a pure forest anymore. Instead, there were small plains in between the forest. There was a lush green grassland and a gurgling stream. There were also countless wildflowers by the stream. The scenery was extremely beautiful. At this moment, the passion in Chief Lu's eyes had reached an unprecedented level. When we reached the stream, he suddenly asked us to stop. Then, he gathered us together. He held the yellowed map in his hand and took a deep breath. Then, he said, "Let's go. We're here." Chapter 68. Just like me, everyone else was confused. They looked around and didn't understand what Chief Lu meant by "we're here." Chief Lu looked up at the fatty and said, "Fire God Temple is right in front of us, but we can't see it with our naked eyes. According to the notes left behind by my ancestors, we need Master Lin to perform divination to reveal the true appearance of Fire God Temple." As soon as he said this, Zhao Yongquan and Fatty frowned at the same time. I didn't know much about divination. Seeing the fatty frown, I thought that he wasn't strong enough, so I asked him softly, "Fatty, what does he mean by divination? The mysteries of heaven are unfathomable. Isn't it risky for you to divine the mysteries of heaven?" I often hear people say things like, recklessly predicting the fate of heaven will result in the wrath of the heavens. Subconsciously, I thought that Chief Lu was forcing the fatty. Who knew that the fatty would shake his head and say, "The fate of heaven is hard to predict, but there's no such thing as recklessly predicting it. The path of divination is to ask about the fate of heaven, but the fate of heaven is an illusory way of saying it. Just like when you ask about the future, you use the fate of heaven to ask about the future, and when you ask about marriage, you also use the fate of heaven to ask about marriage. The fate of heaven is a formless thing, so it has to be related to something else." Once he explained, I understood. The fate of heaven is like the qi during cultivation. Qi is a formless thing, so you have to combine it with other things to have great power, such as talismans, hand seals, artifacts, etc. After the fatty said that, he turned to look at Chief Lu and asked, "What does Chief Lu mean by asking about the fate of heaven? Is it asking for the location? This is a wilderness. If there's no other opportunity, I'm afraid we won't be able to get the location." Chief Lu shook his head and said mysteriously, "I won't ask for the location, I just need Master Lin to perform a divination. When the time comes, Master Lin will naturally understand what I mean." The fatty still didn't understand. Just as he was about to say something, Zhao Yongquan interrupted him and said impatiently, "Just do as Chief Lu said and directly ask about the fate of heaven. We'll know if it's useful after we try." The fatty thought about it and nodded. Then, Chief Lu held the map and walked around a few steps. Then, he used his foot to mark a spot on the ground and told the fatty to walk over and perform a divination. After the fatty was ready, Chief Lu walked to a spot about 100 meters away from the fatty. There was a grassy field there, but the spot where Chief Lu stopped was a little weird. There was a round stone slab on the ground that looked like it was carved by a person. It was very exquisite. The stone slab's diameter was around a meter, just enough for a person to stand on it. Chief Lu walked over and found the stone slab. He looked at Zhao Yongquan and me a few times before stopping on me. He smiled and said, "Mr. Xiao Zhou, please come over and stand on this stone slab. After Master Lin divines the secrets of the heavens, you can use your Dao Qi to assist. Then, the fire god temple will appear." After Lu, I asked, Master, you?" Bai said. "Boss," I said, "of you, Master, Lu T. Lu is, I didn't." I glanced at Chief Lu and became more vigilant. I had a feeling that he was hiding something. Of course, being vigilant was just being vigilant. I had been paid to come here this time, so I had to help out when I needed to. I didn't say anything and walked directly to the round stone. I read the meditation mantra and held my breath. I was ready to receive the Tao energy at any time. When everything was ready, the fatty took out 3 copper coins. He closed his eyes and muttered something. About a minute later, his right eye was still closed, but his left eye slowly opened. In his eye, the pupil had already separated into an upper and lower pupil. There was a mysterious aura around him. When his left eye opened completely, the 3 copper coins in Fatty's hand were already covered with a layer of lustrous white light. At this moment, he waved his left hand, and the 3 copper coins in his hand flew into the air at the same time, forming a straight line in front of him. The straight line formed by the copper coins only stayed in the air for a moment before the 3 copper coins fell to the ground. However, after the copper coins fell to the ground, the lustrous white light didn't fall with them. Instead, it stayed in its original position. The 3 dots of light that were arranged in a straight line slowly gathered together. Then, they swayed left and right a few times, unexpectedly turning into a butterfly that emitted a faint white light. Its 2 wings flapped as it slowly flew forward. This strange scene caused everyone to hold their breath. Their gazes were fixated on the small butterfly as it slowly flew forward. Finally, it flew to a place not far from me. At this point, its speed suddenly increased, and it suddenly rushed forward. Then, it seemed to hit a transparent barrier in the air in front of it, and its white body suddenly broke into pieces, turning into many tiny specks of light, and scattered into the air. As it scattered, countless tiny light dots outlined the transparent barrier in the air. Before we could exclaim in surprise, the transparent barrier seemed to flash with a red light. Then, a continuous shadow appeared in the air, blocking the mountains in the distance. It seemed that something was about to appear out of thin air. Everyone gasped in surprise. Meanwhile, Director Lu and Zhao Yongquan's faces were flushed red as they stared fixedly at the scene before them. At this moment, I felt my body become strangely hot. It seemed that a huge force was pressing down on my body. Director Lu's voice came from afar. Mr. Zhou, guide the Tao Qi. Without needing him to say anything, I had already prepared to guide the Tao Qi to my body. At this moment, under the pressure of the huge force around me, I didn't need to take the initiative to guide the Tao Qi. It was as if some force was driving me. Although I was prepared, I suddenly became vigilant. I felt that a huge danger was about to descend. However, at this moment I had no way out. My body was being driven by a force. I didn't need to take the initiative. The Tao Qi instantly came to my body and surged out of my body. At the same time, the heat that had enveloped my body suddenly entered my body. At first, I only felt my body heat up slightly, but in an instant the heat started to expand, as though I had been thrown into a pool of boiling lava. The strange thing was that although I could feel the heat in my heart, my body felt cold. My consciousness was clear for a moment, but then it became blurry. At this moment, I wasn't just vigilant anymore. I felt an unprecedented fear. It was the fear of life and death. I could feel the aura of death. I wanted to struggle, but my body was restrained by a huge force. I couldn't move at all. Even my consciousness seemed to be under a huge pressure. It felt as if a huge god was looking down on me, making me crawl on the ground and unable to move. Even the thought of resisting was suppressed to the point where it almost disappeared. Right when my consciousness was about to sink, the continuous shadows in the air became more solid. I could vaguely see the outline of a huge building appear in the air. Everyone stared at the huge building that was between illusion and reality. Their faces were filled with amazement and admiration. Zhao Yongquan and Director Liu were even more intoxicated. I was alone. I slowly closed my eyes. My body felt as if I was falling into a black abyss. At this moment, the jade bracelet on my chest suddenly emitted a cool aura. In just a blink of an eye, it had spread to my entire body. At this moment, I finally felt the scorching heat in my body. My body was so hot that it felt like it was about to explode. The pain was clearly transmitted to my brain from every part of my body. Before I could scream, another cool aura spread to my entire body. This time, my body felt as if I had been thrown into ice water. The scorching heat was instantly neutralized by the ice water. My entire body felt extremely comfortable. As the pain in my body disappeared, my consciousness became less blurry. I opened my eyes, and the fiery red light in front of me slowly disappeared. Chapter 69. The amazement and admiration on everyone's faces froze the moment the phantom disappeared. They looked at each other in dismay, not knowing what had happened. Boss Liu and Zhao Yongquan's expressions darkened. Boss Liu turned to look at me. There was an indescribable shock and confusion on his face. He even felt strangely relaxed. He stood there in a daze, not saying a word. Zhao Yongquan roared angrily. He did not look at me, nor did he look at the place where the phantom disappeared. Instead, he stared at Boss Liu. His voice was extremely low as he gritted his teeth and asked, "Why?" Boss Liu suddenly laughed bitterly. "Why? How would I know why? I've prepared for decades. I've done everything I could. Why?" As he laughed, he seemed to cry again. He continued in a strange tone, "Everything is the will of the heavens. I should have known, I should have known. The will of the heavens cannot be defied. The will of the heavens cannot be defied. But I can't accept it." Boss Liu slumped to the ground. He clenched his right fist and smashed it hard on the ground. Zhao Yongquan roared again. He suddenly raised his leg and kicked Boss Liu away. He seemed to have gone mad as he roared. Along the way, my paperweight Dharma artifact was gone. The paper puppet also used up all of its spiritual energy. I even lost 10 years of my lifespan. Now you're telling me that this is the will of the heavens? His gaze was extremely cold. He raised the steel sword in his hand and was about to stab Boss Liu. Everyone's expression changed. They went to block Zhao Yongquan. Zhao Yongquan looked at the retired Special Forces soldiers, Tang Mingyang, Fan Jichao, and the others. His expression was full of disdain. He sneered and said, "You think you can stop me?" With that, he raised his sword and was about to charge forward. Fatty ran over and shouted in a low voice, "Uncle Master Zhao, calm down." His voice contained Dao Qi and had a calming power. However, the difference between his realm and Zhao Yongquan's was too great. This calming power could not calm Zhao Yongquan at all. At this moment, Director Lu suddenly stood up from the ground. He stretched out his hand to wipe away the trace of blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. He raised his head, but he did not look at Zhao Yongquan. Instead, he looked at the place where the continuous shadows had disappeared. His expression gradually calmed down. "Daoist Zhao, it's just that we didn't succeed this time. You saw it too. The Fire God Temple was just a hair away from appearing." After saying that, he turned his head to look at Zhao Yongquan, as if he did not mind being kicked by Zhao Yongquan at all, and said with a smile, "According to my speculation, it should be because Mr. Little Zhou's cultivation is still shallow, and the Dao Qi he attracted is not enough to make the Fire God Temple completely appear. Why don't we rest for a day and wait for Master Lin to recover tomorrow before divining the secrets of the heavens? This time, it's Priest Zhao's turn to guide the Dao Qi to assist. You will definitely be able to lure out the Fire God Temple." Even though he was flustered when he lost his composure, now that Chairman Lu had recovered his emotions, he was still as confident as before in his speech, which was convincing. Zhao Yongquan stared blankly for a moment, the anger on his face fading a little. He stood there in silence for a moment before sheathing his sword. However, the gloomy expression on his face did not disappear. He looked at Chairman Lu and gritted his teeth. "I hope so." After saying that, he waved his sleeves and walked to the stream to sit on the ground. He closed his eyes and took out a dark red stone from who knows where. His hands continuously rubbed against it. At that moment, I jumped down from the round stone and stretched my body. Other than my clothes being drenched in sweat, I didn't feel any other discomfort. Only then did I relax and return to the crowd. Chairman Lu was the first to welcome me. He chatted with me and asked me if I felt uncomfortable just now. I casually replied to him, but I was very cautious in my heart. The sense of danger that I felt when I was on the verge of death was definitely not an illusion. If it wasn't for the cold current that flowed out from the jade bracelet, I was afraid that I would have been burnt to ashes by the incomparably high temperature. Even though my consciousness was a little blurry at that time, I could feel that the Fire God Temple's image that appeared out of thin air was slowly solidifying under the high temperature. This feeling was as if I was the sacrificial offering to lure out the Fire God Temple. At first, I wasn't too sure about this idea. However, when Chairman Lu came over and asked me in a roundabout way, I felt that there was something fishy going on. Then I thought about it. Why did Chairman Lu call me here in the first place? Was it because I helped him move his ancestral grave? Although Taoists were different from geomancy masters, it was more of a difference in cultivation concept. Zhao Yongquan's power was much higher than mine. It was impossible that Chairman Lu didn't know that. However, he knew that with Zhao Yongquan here, he wouldn't need me along the way. Why did he call me here? A person like Chairman Lu always had a purpose in everything he did. It was just like how he called the fatty to divine the heavenly secret to lure out the Fire God Temple. He called me here for the last ritual to guide the Taoist energy to help lure out the Fire God Temple. Or rather, it was for the last sacrificial ritual. From the beginning to the end, in Chairman Lu's plan, I was just a sacrifice. Even if he relied on me many times to make everyone go off track, in Chairman Lu's heart, my role had never changed. Looking at Boss Lu, who was still smiling and asking about my well-being, I felt a chill in my heart. Originally, I thought that I had chosen this experience, but I didn't expect that I had fallen into this trap from the very beginning. A few years ago, When Chairman Lu found me for the first time and asked me to help him look at his ancestral grave, all the traps had been laid out. Now that I thought about it, his ancestor could find someone to set up the metal water formation to protect the ancestral grave. Why did he have to move the grave now? Moreover, when he moved the grave, couldn't he find a real geomancy master? Why did he have to find me, who was still a child at the time? I reckoned that Chairman Lu just wanted to use this method to find a geomancy master without any background, so that he wouldn't have to worry about anything. Who knew that I would stupidly bump into him? After thinking through everything, I couldn't help but feel angry. However, I didn't explode in the end. I remembered that Chairman Lu had casually told Zhao Yongquan that he would replace me tomorrow to summon the Fire God Temple again. It was pure murder, but Zhao Yongquan didn't know about it. Moreover, he didn't have a jade bracelet, so he couldn't be as lucky as me. After Zhao Yongquan had lost his composure, he had kicked Chairman Lu. At that time, he didn't expect that a few minutes later, Chairman Lu would draw a death cage for him. Although Chairman Lu was just an ordinary person, he was a boss in the business world. Being ruthless and ruthless was the most basic training. According to him, he had prepared for this trip for dozens of years. I didn't believe that he didn't have other trump cards. I smiled at Chairman Lu and pretended to chat with him for a while. Then, I went to find the fat man. It wasn't the time to turn hostile. Chairman Lu was more familiar with the situation here than I was. If I turned hostile now, who knew what tricks he would use to deal with me? Thinking about what the powerful Zhao Yongquan would have to face tomorrow, my heart became colder. I found the fat man and asked him about Chairman Lu. However, the fat man didn't know much. He had joined this trip because of Zhao Yongquan. I didn't tell the fat man about my speculation. I just reminded him to be careful. Chairman Lu's purpose for coming here might not be that simple. The fat man didn't find it strange. He just nodded in silence. I guessed he had found some clues. In the blink of an eye, it was the second day. When I saw Zhao Yongquan and Chairman Lu, their eyes were red. I guess they hadn't slept for the whole night. Chairman Lu calmly arranged for us to eat. Compared to yesterday, it was much calmer today. On the other hand, Zhao Yongquan seemed to be in a hurry. He kept urging Chairman Lu and the fat man to prepare. I didn't know if Chairman Lu had promised Zhao Yongquan something, or if there was something in the Fire God Temple that was important to Zhao Yongquan. That was why he was in such a hurry. Looking at Zhao Yongquan's appearance, I couldn't bear it even though I had a grudge against him. However, when I opened my mouth, I realized that I couldn't tell him the truth. To open the Fire God Temple, we needed a sacrifice, and there were only 2 candidates for this sacrifice. Chapter 70. While Zhao Yongquan, Chief Lu, and the others were preparing to open the Fire God Temple again, I sat by the stream and held the jade bracelet around my neck. I was thinking about the time when I was in danger yesterday, when the jade bracelet had appeared. Last night, I had called Tong Tong out to ask her. She said that she had also felt the danger, but she couldn't help me at all. According to what Tong Tong had said, besides her, there were only ghosts in the jade bracelet. Could it be that the ghosts had saved me at the critical moment? It was almost impossible. I could feel the danger that I had faced yesterday. That kind of danger wasn't something that the ghosts could resist. Although their numbers were huge, they were just like how they were afraid of Tong Tong. There were some things that were on the level of life. They definitely weren't the ones that had helped me yesterday. After thinking about it, I couldn't figure it out. However, I felt a sense of security in my heart. The power in the jade bracelet seemed to be able to restrict the power of the Fire God Temple. If I were to meet with any danger, maybe the jade bracelet could be my support. I didn't think for long as the fatty and Zhao Yongquan were ready. As the fatty divined the secrets of heaven, he drew out the mysterious light butterfly. The shadow of the Fire God Temple appeared in our vision again. Yesterday, when I was standing on the circular stone platform, I was focused on guiding the energy to my body, so I didn't see the full appearance of the shadow. Now that I was sitting in front of it, I could finally see it clearly. However, as soon as the phantom appeared, I abruptly stood up. It reminded me of the huge underground palace under the Red Shadow's tomb, where I had seen countless palaces and pavilions. Even though there was no stone door or two huge beast statues here, the pavilion that was outlined by the phantom looked very similar to the building behind the stone door. I lifted my head to look at the fatty. He had also seen the building in the underground palace. However, after he had divined the secrets of heaven, he just closed his eyes. He seemed very weak, and I couldn't see his thoughts from his expression. I temporarily suppressed the suspicion in my heart. At this moment, the fire god temple's image had already appeared. Zhao Yongquan had already started to guide the qi to his body. Unlike yesterday, Zhao Yongquan might have been very impatient. When the fatty was divining the mysteries of heaven, he had already guided the qi of Tao into the longsword in his hand. After the illusion of the fire god temple appeared, he hurriedly chanted a mysterious incantation. The long sword in his hand pointed forward, and a glowing white light that was visible to the naked eye directly shot towards the illusion of the fire god temple. This lustrous white light was as thick as a stone pillar. It was the realm that a geomancy master could only reach after undergoing the dragon vein baptism, the realm of guiding qi into a pillar. Following the projection of this white light, the shadow of the fire god temple instantly became more solid. At the same time, a bright red dot of light attached itself to the white light and flew out. Almost in an instant, it reached the longsword in Zhao Yongquan's hand. Then, as if a fire had been lit on the longsword, it suddenly burst into flames. Zhao Yongquan's expression was clearly astonished, but before he could react, the flames had already spread along his wrist to his body. At this moment, the fanaticism in Zhao Yongquan's eyes finally disappeared and was replaced by panic. However, this kind of panic could only stay in his eyes. The long sword in his hand was still pointing at the illusion of the fire god temple. At the tip of the long sword, the white light that was as thick as a stone pillar had also not disappeared. In the eyes of others, perhaps Zhao Yongquan was enduring the raging flames on his body and was trying his best to guide the qi of Tao towards the illusion of the fire god temple. However, only I knew that he was being guided by a copious amount of power and was unable to control his own body. The small wisp of flame that had spread to his body seemed to have turned into a raging fire the moment it came into contact with Zhao Yongquan, completely enveloping him. However, this flame was very strange. After burning for a long time, the surface of Zhao Yongquan's body was still very normal. Even the clothes on his body were not burned. It seemed that this flame only had the appearance of the flame, but did not have the temperature of the flame. However, the expression on Zhao Yongquan's face gradually froze. His face was filled with shock, regret, and fear. Although he was still standing there with the long sword in his hand still raised, I knew that Zhao Yongquan was already dead. Only the expression on a dead person's face would be so real. I heard suppressed cheers. I turned around and saw that Tang Mingyang, Fan Jichao, and the others had already started to cheer loudly. It had been a tough journey. At this moment, no matter what goal everyone had in their hearts, they couldn't help but feel like the clouds had parted to see the moon. Even I let out an inexplicable sigh. I turned around and glanced at Director Liu. His face was still filled with excitement, but I couldn't see much happiness. Instead, his expression made me feel even more gloomy. The huge building that stretched for hundreds of meters was like a mirage that completely solidified in front of us. The cheering crowd didn't have the time to care about Zhao Yongquan's current appearance. Only I turned around to take a look. Zhao Yongquan's arm that had been raised high finally fell down at this moment. The flames surrounding his body had strangely disappeared in an instant. On the surface, other than his blank expression, He didn't seem to be injured at all. However, right after that, a cool breeze blew past. Zhao Yongquan's body suddenly cracked and turned into ashes. With the wind, he completely disappeared from my sight. My heart jumped. I couldn't believe what I had just seen with my own eyes. What kind of flames had wrapped around his body earlier? On the surface, he looked unharmed, but in reality, he could burn a person like he was a piece of paper. In the end, only ashes were left. Somehow, I felt that it didn't look like burning, but more like a juicer. After squeezing out all the energy from Zhao Yongquan's body, there was only some residue left. When someone finally turned around to look for Zhao Yongquan, they realized that he was gone. Then, they immediately went to report to Director Liu. Director Liu didn't turn around and said that Zhao Yongquan had entered Fire God Temple in advance. Everyone didn't understand, but no one asked. They were so excited that they wanted to follow him in. However, Director Liu stopped Tang Mingyang and the others and told them to pack their luggage and prepare their equipment. Everyone carried a huge bag. Only then did they enter the fully armed Fire God Temple. When we were far away, we could already feel the pressure from the huge building. When we walked in front of it, the huge building was even more shocking. The outermost part of the Fire God Temple didn't have the huge stone door that I had seen in the underground palace. Instead, there was a row of buildings that looked like a wall. It was dark red in color, and in the middle, there was a similar dark red wooden door. On the door hung a large signboard with the words, Fire God Temple, written in seal script. Director Liu brought everyone and walked at the very front. When they arrived below the huge signboard, Director Liu only lifted his head to take a glance. Then, he didn't stop and directly walked up to push the wooden door. The huge wooden door didn't move at all. However, as he pushed the door open, there was a clear sound of a bell from behind the wall. This place was called Fire God Temple. The sound of the bell really sounded like the bell from inside a temple. It wasn't noisy at all. Instead, it made people feel a sense of tranquility from the bottom of their hearts. The bell rang a total of 9 times before it stopped with a lingering sound. At the same time, the wooden door that Director Liu couldn't move no matter how hard he pushed suddenly started to move. Creak, creak, the wooden door looked tall and new, but it made an extremely old sound. After an unknown amount of time, the 2 wooden doors finally opened completely, revealing a huge doorway. There was no one behind the door, but there was a bronze stone tablet. On it, there were also 8 big words written in seal script. East Jun Siming, Inghuo Shou Xian. As the door opened completely, there was a faint, ancient, and mysterious chanting sound coming from inside the door. The sun is about to rise from the east. Illuminate the mulberry tree on my threshold. Soothe the horse in peace. The night is bright and clear. Ride the dragon and ride the thunder. Carry the cloud flag and bow to the snake. Long Tai Xing is about to ascend. Heart is low and hesitant. Chang's voice and beauty entertain people. Spectators forget to return. Fluttering drums, Xiao Zhong Yao Yao, chirping and blowing the flute, Si Ling Bao is virtuous. Fluttering in the air, jade once was, poetry and dance are displayed. Responding to the law, spirit is coming in the sun. Blue clouds are dressed in white, raising a long arrow to shoot the heavenly wolf. Controlling the arc of the sun, supporting the Big Dipper, drinking osmanthus. Chapter 71. This ethereal voice gave me a familiar feeling. It reminded me of the time when I had fallen to the ground outside of Red Shadow's grave and heard that ethereal voice. However, the voice this time was a little different from that day. It was not the kind of clear singing of a young girl, but more like the chanting of Buddhist scriptures by the monks in the temple, or the deep repentance of believers. It was incomparably solemn, and brought incomparable heaviness. Back then, when I had heard the light and spacious singing, I had felt happy. But now, the ancient and mysterious singing made my heart sink. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. Under the solemn music, all of us stood at the door in silence. Only when the music faded away did Chief Lu walk into the room with a ferocious expression. The rest of us woke up from the shock of the music and followed closely behind. I followed at the back and also started walking forward. However, after taking a few steps, I suddenly stopped and turned my head to look behind me in bewilderment. Along the way, I had used the dragon-seeking technique to follow the direction of the dragon vein. First, I searched for the embryonic aura, then the ancestral dragon. When I reached the fire god temple, I confirmed the existence of the true dragon vein. According to my deductions, the dragon vein stopped here. After the ancestral dragon, it had to be the true dragon vein. This was where the ancestral dragon disappeared. This meant that after passing through this forest, the true dragon vein was right behind us. However, when I walked closer to the fire god temple, I felt the aura of the true dragon vein. I turned around and used the dragon-seeking technique to look at the terrain again. I confirmed that this was where the ancestral dragon disappeared. Logically speaking, I had to walk forward to find the aura of the true dragon vein. Why did I feel it earlier? I turned around and looked at the mysterious door of the fire god temple. Suddenly, a thought appeared in my head. Was the true dragon vein not in front of us but in the fire god temple? How was this possible? That was a true dragon vein. A true dragon vein could nurture the fate of a country and control the rise and fall of billions of lives. Although the fire god temple could be considered to be huge, how could it accommodate a true dragon vein? I instinctively didn't believe it, but the aura of the true dragon vein became thicker. My body couldn't help but draw out energy. This was a sign of drawing the true dragon vein into my body. After finding the true dragon vein and using its energy to cleanse my body, a true dragon vein would be stored in my body. At this moment, the first Earth Master realm, dragon-seeking realm, would be the end and I would enter the second realm. Looking at this sign, I had to believe that the true dragon vein was in the fire god temple. Along the way, I discovered a trace of a dragon vein in the canyon, including the embryonic breath and ancestral dragon. All of them were derived from the true dragon vein in the fire god temple. Previously, I had thought that this fire god temple was an illusory place. After all, I couldn't see it with my naked eyes. With the fatty's divination and Zhao Yongquan's entire body as a sacrifice, it appeared in front of us. It looked like an evil sacrificial ritual that summoned something out of thin air. But now, it seems that there is a true dragon vein inside, and it can even give birth to a long and narrow mountain range that we have to travel for several days. This fire god temple definitely exists here, but because of something, it cannot be seen with the naked eye. I was really excited. No matter what, I had found the true dragon vein. My goal for this trip had been achieved. Even though I had encountered many dangers, at this moment, all my hardships had paid off. Moreover, it was a great reward. Due to the delay just now, Chief Lu and the others had already walked into the fire god temple. They were standing under the bronze tablet and discussing something. I took a deep breath and quickly followed them in. Although I could feel the true dragon vein, the aura wasn't thick. It wasn't enough for me to draw out the power of the true dragon vein. I had to enter the fire god temple and find the source of the true dragon vein. I was really excited. However, when I walked to the door, something unexpected happened. I lifted my leg and stepped through the door. My eyes had clearly seen that I was going to step through the door, but when I landed, I realized that I was still standing outside the door. I didn't know what was going on. I lifted my leg and took another step forward. However, when I stood still, I realized that I was still standing outside the door. It was the same position as before. I hadn't entered the door at all. What was going on? I lifted my head and looked at Chief Lu, the fatty and the others. They had all walked in normally and were standing inside the door. Why couldn't I enter? I didn't believe it. I gritted my teeth and walked forward again. I even exerted strength to move forward. Everything was normal, just like how I felt when I was walking normally. However, after I took a step forward, I looked down and realized that I was still standing in the same spot. It was just a short step from the door to the inside, but no matter what, I couldn't step in. I tried a few more times, but the result didn't change. Just as I didn't know what to do, the fatty suddenly ran back excitedly. He probably didn't notice my situation and said to me excitedly, "Third baby, did you see the tablet?" Tablet? I lifted my head and looked at the tablet with the words carved on it. "What's wrong?" The fatty lowered his voice and said to me, "That's bright stone. Such a big piece, and it's all bright stone. Oh my God, it's such a big piece." I was wondering why Zhao Yongquan was so excited along the way. Such a big piece of fiery obsidian stone. Even a small piece can allow one to sense star power. With such a big piece, even a pig can break through to the glorious knowledge realm. The fatty's words shocked me. Blazing obsidian. Dragon seeking, acupuncture point sealing, glory knowledge. The hardest of the three realms was the last one, glory knowledge. Not only did you have to recognize the stars, you had to guide the star power into your body in order to break through the last shackles and reach the heavenly master realm. Searching for a dragon was already an arduous task, not to mention the final glory of knowledge. Even in a famous Taoist sect that had been passed down for 1,000 years, there were only a handful of people who could break through the glory of knowledge and reach the celestial master realm in a few years. But then again, although glory knowledge was hard, it was the same as dragon seeking. There was a shortcut, and that was bright stone. Guiding star power was extremely hard. Cultivation and opportunities were both indispensable. Bitter cultivation was fine, but opportunities were hard to come by. Many people couldn't find an opportunity in their entire lives, and this bright stone was the opportunity. In the legends, bright stone was a meteorite that had fallen to Earth from the 7 glorious stars. It contained the power of the 7 glorious stars. According to the 7 glorious stars, it was divided into sun, moon, metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Of course, it was said to be the 7 glorious stars, but in reality, sun and moon didn't have bright stones. There were only metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Feng Shui masters in the glory knowledge realm relied on bright stones to sense star power and artificially create an opportunity to guide star power. No wonder Zhao Yongquan was so desperate along the way, and was even willing to use magic tools. Compared to bright stone, magic tools weren't even worth mentioning. It was a pity that such a large piece of bright stone was placed here, but Zhao Yongquan would never be able to see it. I asked the fatty what he was going to do with this bright stone. The excitement on the fatty's face disappeared quite a bit, and he said with some distress that he had already tried. This stone tablet seemed to be buried deep underground, and couldn't be moved at all. Chief Lu was in a hurry to go inside, so it was better to think of a way to get the stone tablet out when he came back. Then, the fatty pulled me inside and said, "Let me see if there's any way to get a few stones from the stone tablet." At this moment, I smiled wryly and told him about the strange situation that I had encountered. The fatty was stunned, and his eyes widened in disbelief. He turned around and walked out of the door. Then, he lifted his feet and walked inside without any mishaps. "There's no problem." The fatty tried it himself and said, "Let me try it again." I walked forward again, but the result was the same. I couldn't get in at all. The fatty lowered his head and looked at the ground at the entrance for a long time, but he couldn't find anything. At this moment, Chief Lu walked around the stone tablet with his people, and was about to continue forward. Bai Ling turned around and told us to follow. The fatty hesitated and looked at Bai Ling, then at me. I knew he wanted to follow, so I waved at him and said, "I'm going to look into the situation first. There's no reason for me to stop at the entrance and not go in after spending so much effort to find this place." Only then did he nod and jog inside, following Boss Lu and the rest. After they left, I checked the door from top to bottom. There was a door frame around the door, and there was a door sill on the ground. However, everything looked normal. There weren't any patterns or carvings on the door. There was no formation here. After searching for a long time, I couldn't find anything. I wasn't willing to give up, so I tried a few more times. In the end, I couldn't do anything else. I sat down at the entrance, feeling dispirited. To a feng shui master, finding a true dragon's vein alone is a great opportunity. I've been excited for the past few days, but I didn't expect that it would be such an unimaginable result. I had entered a treasure mountain, but I had to return empty-handed. It was a terrible feeling. After a long time, I pulled myself together from this blow. I thought that since I couldn't find the true dragon vein, I could just sit here and absorb the thin dragon vein's energy to increase my power. However, I couldn't calm down. I tried for a long time, but I couldn't draw much of the dragon vein's energy into my body. Fatty's Tao of divination was different from that of a normal feng shui master. There was no record of it in the death scripture, so I wasn't too sure. However, to a feng shui master, the true dragon's vein is definitely beneficial. I hope Fatty can find the location of the true dragon's vein in the Fire God Temple. I sat there, letting my imagination run wild. Right at this moment, a horrible shriek came from the Fire God Temple. It woke me up from my thoughts. I lifted my head to look. Behind the door, a beam of light shot out from the dark passage. In just a blink of an eye, the entire place was brightly lit. Chief Lu and the others, who had disappeared a long time ago, suddenly appeared not far from the entrance. A group of them, with their backs to me, were gathered round a round table. There were 2 huge braziers on both sides of the platform. The light I had just seen came from these 2 braziers. On top of the round platform, there was a huge scarlet chair. On the chair, there was a statue sitting cross-legged. I didn't know what material this statue was made of. Although it looked much bigger than a normal person, it was very lifelike. It wore a plain robe, and its hair was tied up in a bun. It had sword-like eyebrows and a wide forehead, and a nose that looked like a hanging gall. However, its eyes were closed. At this moment, the Fatty and the others were standing under the stone statue. Chief Lu was kneeling in front of it. His hands were still pressed on the ground, but his head was raised high. His eyes were filled with anger and resentment. He stared at the stone statue and roared angrily. It's been a few hundred years. Our Lu family has endless wealth, but we can only live in fear. We can only be controlled by you like a dog. A single bloodline for a few hundred years, and we can't even live to 50. My grandfather is willing, my father is willing, but I'm not willing. Why do we have to die at 50? Why do extra children have to die prematurely? Why do we have to curse our Lu family for hundreds of years? My ancestors came to find you, but they only found a more serious curse. But I don't believe it. You're not a god, you're just a devil. I don't want to die, but I'm not afraid of death. Today, I'm going to die with you. Today, I'm going to eliminate the devil. Chief Lu's voice was like a malicious ghost from hell. His eyes were filled with blood. Then, he stood up from the ground and roared at the people behind him. Then, I saw Tang Mingyang, Fan Jichao, and the others put down the huge bags they were carrying. After opening them, they took out boxes after boxes. Chief Lu stared at the huge stone statue and laughed like a madman. Society is different now. No matter how strong you are, you can't be stronger than a nuclear bomb. I can't get a nuclear bomb, so I can only get explosives. 500 kilograms of high explosives. Even if you're a god, you're still going to die today. As he said that, Chief Lu raised a small detonator in his hand. It looked like he was about to press it. My body went numb as I listened. Although I didn't understand the curse that Chief Lu said, I heard the 500 kilograms of high explosives very clearly. 500 kilograms of high explosives. It was probably enough to flatten a mountain. No wonder Fan Jichao and the others brought so many supplies along the way. No wonder this morning, when Zhao Yongquan urged them, Chief Lu specially told them to pack up. It turned out that everything was prepared for this moment. I didn't care why Chief Lu wanted to die. 500 kilograms of high explosives probably wouldn't give me any space to escape. However, I knew that I didn't want to die. Seeing that Chief Lu was about to press the detonator, I couldn't care about anything else. I turned around and ran out. In an instant, I ran dozens of meters away. Right at that moment, an explosion came from behind me. I was stunned. It wasn't because of the explosion, nor was it because I felt that I had given up on escaping. It was because the explosion was very soft. It was as soft as the sound of firecrackers during Chinese New Year. I turned around in surprise. The door of Fire God Temple was still wide open. However, I couldn't see the fatty and the others in the deep passageway. Instead, there was a huge scarlet chair and a stone statue wearing a plain robe with his hair tied up in a bun. No, it wasn't a stone statue, it was a person. Just as I turned my head, the stone statue suddenly opened its eyes. The corners of its grave and stern mouth rose slightly, revealing a proud and aloof smile as it opened its mouth and asked me. Chapter 72. Looking at the statue's silver pupils, my head buzzed, and I was dumbfounded. Because I felt the aura of a true dragon's vein. It was the aura of a true dragon's vein that had disappeared in Fire God Temple. It had actually appeared on the statue. This feeling was as though the statue's body was a true dragon's vein. It was unbelievable. What was even more unbelievable was what he had said to me. "I'm here?" Why did he ask me that? Did he recognize me and was waiting for me here? Before I could react, the statue suddenly stood up from the huge scarlet chair. He shook his head and said, "But you came too early. You weren't prepared, and I wasn't prepared either." With that, the stone statue turned around and directly left the depths of the passageway. I didn't understand the meaning of his words at all. The statue disappeared once again. At the same time, the entire Fire God Temple became illusory again. I was shocked. When I ran out from the door, Director Liu, the fatty and the others were still in the tunnel. If Fire God Temple disappeared, what would they do? Just as I was getting anxious, a figure suddenly appeared from the back of the huge vermilion chair in the deep tunnel of the Fire God Temple. I focused and saw that it was Bai Ling. I was happy to see her. Since she was fine, it meant that the explosion didn't cause much damage. The fatty should be fine too. I quickly waved at her and shouted that Fire God Temple was about to disappear. I asked her to inform the others to come out. I called Bai Ling for a long time, but she didn't answer me. Her behavior was strange. After she got out from the back of the chair, she directly jumped onto the scarlet chair. She bent her waist and looked for something on the back of the chair. Looking at her, she seemed to be very familiar with the huge chair. Seeing that Fire God Temple was becoming more and more illusory, I couldn't care about Bai Ling's weird actions at such a crucial moment. I just shouted at her again and again. However, Bai Ling didn't move and the others were nowhere to be seen. In the end, when Fire God Temple was only left with a trace of light, Bai Ling finally stood up from the huge chair. She was holding something circular in her hand. Due to the distance, I couldn't see clearly what it was, but I vaguely felt that it was similar to the jade bracelet on my neck. Ghost gave me a mysterious smile. Then, he raised his hand and threw the thing in his hand at me. However, just as that thing flew into the air, the shadow of the Fire God Temple completely disappeared before my eyes. I quickly ran over. After searching for a long time, I couldn't find Director Liu, the fatty, and the others. I couldn't find Bai Ling either. They seemed to have disappeared along with the Fire God Temple. I remembered the jade ring-shaped object Bai Ling had thrown at me. I searched the area within a radius of several kilometers. Unfortunately, I didn't find anything similar. When the Fire God Temple disappeared, that thing probably didn't have time to be thrown out. Previously, when we entered the Fire God Temple, we left some of the supplies we brought outside. At this moment, these things are still here. I gathered some food and set up a tent. I stayed here for another day, but the fire god temple didn't appear again. On the way back, I thought about the operation. Although on the surface, it looked like Director Liu had organized this operation and everyone was arranged by him, in reality, it seemed that everyone had their own goal. Zhao Yongquan wanted the blazing stone, while Director Liu's real goal was to destroy the fire god temple. What I couldn't understand the most was Bai Ling. All along, I had thought that she was just Director Liu's secretary. However, the last scene before the fire god temple disappeared made me realize that she wasn't as simple as she looked. Why did she know that there was something on the back of the chair? Was that thing a jade bracelet? Why did she throw me what she found? Everyone seemed to have hidden thoughts. What about the fatty? I shook my head. At this moment, I was completely confused. I felt that everyone knew something about the fire god temple, but I was completely in the dark. As Tang Mingyang, Fan Jichao, and the others had brought along a large amount of high-explosive gunpowder, they were running out of supplies. It was not enough for everyone to return. From this, it could be seen that Chairman Liu had no intention of returning at all. However, I was the only one left. These supplies were more than enough for me to return. I thought about going back to find the fatty, but the fire god temple had disappeared. Even if it hadn't disappeared, I wouldn't be able to enter. In the end, I sat by the river for 3 days, but there were still no clues. Helplessly, I decided to give up. Firstly, if I continued to wait, I wouldn't have enough supplies. Secondly, judging from the fatty's divination skills, he was much stronger than me. Moreover, he knew more about the fire god temple than me. If he couldn't save himself, there was no point for me to stay here. Rather than sitting here and waiting aimlessly, I might as well go back to inform the fatty's sect. With their power, it would definitely be more useful than me. After a long journey, I finally left the primitive forest and returned to the canyon that I had come from. Since it had only been a few days, I didn't look for the little white snake. I prepared to pass through the canyon and leave. However, when I passed through the canyon, I unexpectedly found a small group of ghosts. This discovery startled me. There was no one around here, and Tong Tong had collected all the souls he had seen in the ravine. Why were there so many souls in this area? It didn't make sense at all. Since there weren't many ghosts this time, they didn't see me. I didn't ask Tong to come out and deal with them. I quietly followed the group of ghosts and wanted to know why they were wandering around the canyon. Unfortunately, after studying them for the whole afternoon, the ghosts just wandered back and forth in the canyon. They seemed to be wandering aimlessly. I didn't get any results. After leaving the canyon, I suddenly had an idea. According to the rumors, the place where the Gehenna received souls would have a large number of wandering ghosts. They would try to be taken to the netherworld to enter the cycle of reincarnation. Could it be that this canyon was the entrance where the Gehenna received souls? The netherworld was an extremely mysterious place. Even feng shui masters didn't know much about the netherworld. According to the rumors, the Gehenna that could enter the world of the living had unfathomable power. It wasn't something that I could estimate at this moment. After leaving the canyon, I returned to the place where we had crossed the Yellow Spring River. The river was still as deep as before, but the water level had dropped a lot, and the river had become very narrow. Even the uppermost part of the river, where the floating corpse bridge had appeared that day, was almost dry, and one could even see the caves flowing out from the bottom of the mountain. Back then, the Yellow Spring River was 40 to 50 meters wide. According to Fan Jichao and the others, the depth of the river was over 100 meters. However, who would have thought that the source of the river was actually this small cave in the mountain wall? I was worried that it wouldn't be easy to cross the river on the way back. It would take me until the first day of the next month, when the floating corpse bridge would appear again. Moreover, I could even encounter more dangers at that time. However, it seemed I didn't need to wait anymore. After the water level dropped, the cliff at the source of the river wasn't as straight as it had been before. It looked like an ordinary mountain ridge with a slight slope. Although the slope was steep, as long as I was careful, I could still climb over it. I threw away all my luggage and climbed along the mountain wall until I reached the other side of the river. After crossing the river, I was only half a day away from Shenongjia's scenic area. Half a day later, I returned to the scenic area. However, I didn't go to the hotel I had stayed in that day. Instead, I booked a ticket and left. More than 10 people had gone on this trip, but I was the only one who had returned. Many people had gone missing, including Chief Lu. I didn't know if it would bring me trouble. I had to be careful. I returned home and rested for a few days. I didn't hear any news about Chief Lu and the others. I felt a little relieved. During this time, I searched everywhere for Zhang Shidao's contact information. Eventually, I found a landline number. I dialed it, and an old man with a hoarse voice picked up the call. I considered my options and told him about the Fire God Temple. Of course, I didn't mention the obsidian and the other strange things. After listening to me, the old man kept silent for a while. Then, he answered me in a calm voice, "I know. Zhang Shidao will deal with the fatty." Then, he hung up the phone. I didn't know what effect this call would bring, but it was the best I could do. I just hoped that Zhang Shidao could find him. At this time, I was still in the 4th year of internship. After staying at home for a few days, I received a notice from the school. They told me to get my graduation certificate and go through the graduation procedures. After returning to the school and getting my graduation certificate, the students in the dormitory started to talk about employment. During the few years of university, I was busy with feng shui. Although I didn't delay my studies, I was still unable to find a job. Since I was going to graduate soon, I was a little lost when it came to finding a job. Just as I got my graduation certificate and was about to leave the school, I unexpectedly met Dai Nanzhou. Although we had a good relationship in the past few years, he was a senior who was 1 year older than me. He had graduated for a year, and we didn't have much contact during this time. It was strange that he suddenly came back to find me. After asking him, I found out that he was working in a relative's company in the south. This time, he came back because something happened in his relative's company, so he came to find me for help. Chapter 73. I thought for a bit and asked Dai Nanzhou, "I heard that the South has a strong feng shui culture, the economy is developing well, and there are a lot of feng shui masters. It should be easy to find someone who knows. Why did you come all the way back to find me?" Dai Nanzhou said with a bitter face, "I've already looked for people before, but those people were all half-baked. I had no other choice, so I came back specially." I became even more interested after he said that, so I asked him to tell me what it was. Who knew that Dai Nanzhou waved his hand and said with a bitter face, "It's a bit urgent, and I can't explain it clearly in a short time. You've already finished your business at the school, so it's best if we leave immediately. I'll tell you on the way." I looked at Dai Nanzhou in surprise and muttered in my heart, how could it not be explained clearly? From his words, it was clear that the matter was a bit troublesome and he couldn't tell me easily. He had to agree first before he could tell me. Perhaps he felt that his conditions were a bit harsh, so Dai Nanzhou said, "As long as you can go there, no matter if it's solved or not, my uncle won't let you go for nothing. You'll get at least 200,000 as compensation." 200,000. This wasn't a small amount, and it was so much just to go. I muttered to myself and couldn't make up my mind. Dai Nanzhou persuaded me again. "You haven't solved your job problem yet, right? I have nothing to do during this period of time anyway. Think about it, other students who go to work might not even earn this much in a year. You only need to go there once, and you can earn 200,000 yuan. Although I can't tell you about it for the time being, we are classmates, so I definitely can't harm you." After hearing him say that, I thought for a bit and nodded in the end. It wasn't because of the temptation of 200,000. Although 200,000 was a lot, I didn't really care. Just last time, Chief Lu gave me a deposit of 500,000 before we left for Shenangjia. The reason why I agreed was mainly because I didn't find a job right now, so I had nothing to do. Moreover, I've already thought about it these few days. Instead of working step by step, I might as well become a feng shui master. On one hand, I can earn more money, and on the other hand, it's my hobby. Since he wanted to be a feng shui master, the south was a better place to go. The economy was developed, and there were more people who believed in feng shui. Coming to find me on behalf of Nanzhou is also a good opportunity. 200,000 was still a small matter. The main thing was to establish a foothold in the south through this matter. After I agreed, Dai Nanzhou happily went to book the ticket. The next morning, I packed my luggage and sent it home, then went to Shenzhen with Dai Nanzhou. On the plane to Shenzhen, Dai Nanzhou finally told me the ins and outs of the matter. The company he worked in was the business of his uncle, Wang Yongjun. His uncle's husband, Wang Yongjun, went into business in the 1980s and was now worth more than 100 million. He owned more than a dozen electronic equipment processing plants in Shenzhen's Longgang district. The accident this time was one of them. This kind of electronic equipment processing plant required a large amount of cheap labor. The migrant workers from the inland cities who came to the south to work basically worked in this kind of factory. The factory that Wang Yongjun worked in had a few hundred workers. Among them, about 100 were female workers. Most of them were from Sichuan, Guizhou, and other provinces. Among them was a Miao female worker named Zhao Ying. She came from a remote area in Guizhou. At the beginning of this year, she had followed her fellow villagers to Shenzhen. The Miaojiang area was located in a remote area. Although the economy there was poor, the environment was good. Many local women had outstanding appearances. It was the same for Zhao Ying. Her clothes were old and shabby, but she was beautiful. As soon as she arrived at the factory, many people remembered her. Although most of the migrant workers were simple and honest, there were also some people with bad conduct. After coming to this city, they had been infected with bad habits. In Shenzhen's Longgang district, almost every factory had a group of womanizing and troublesome workers. Zhao Ying had been working in the factory for a month, but she was harassed by a few hooligans every day. Sometimes, they even found an excuse to take advantage of her. Fortunately, most of the Miao women were straightforward and bold. She had never suffered a big loss. Until one day, 2 to 3 months later, when Zhao Ying was harassed by the hooligans again, a male worker in the factory could not stand it anymore. He stood up for her and chased away the hooligans. It was a cliché scene of a hero saving a damsel in distress, but it made the inexperienced Zhao Ying completely fall for it. Soon, she got together with this male worker named Wang Liang and fell in love. Originally, this was a very beautiful thing, but who would have thought that behind this very ordinary thing, there was a hidden darkness that no one knew about. This Wang Liang was actually one of the hooligans in the factory. That seemingly coincidental hero saving a damsel in distress was actually a meticulous plan by him and the other hooligans. Their goal was, of course, to play with Zhao Ying's feelings. Although he succeeded, Miao women valued chastity. Wang Liang obtained Zhao Ying's feelings, but he could not obtain Zhao Ying's body. While he was distressed, the other hooligans suggested that he bring Zhao Ying out to sing and drink. After they got drunk, they could do whatever they wanted. As long as they had the first time, they would not have to worry about their chastity in the future. Moreover, everyone in the factory knew that they were in a relationship. When Zhao Ying woke up, she could only resign herself to her fate. Wang Liang was not a good person to begin with. Naturally, he would not reject such a despicable method. After hearing it, he was filled with joy. Taking advantage of the weekend, He brought Zhao Ying to the factory's KTV and forced Zhao Ying to drink with his group of hooligans. After Zhao Ying was drunk, he followed his plan and let the others leave. In the private room of the KTV, he successfully obtained Zhao Ying's body. However, the other hooligans helped him save the damsel in distress and gave him ideas. Naturally, they were not willing to do it for nothing. Just when Wang Liang was done and was about to help Zhao Ying put on her clothes, the other hooligans guarding the door could not help but rush in. Under the influence of alcohol, the group of people vented their bestial desires on the drunk Zhao Ying's body. If it was a normal female worker who encountered such a thing, she might have left the matter unsettled. After all, she was in a foreign land and her boyfriend was involved. Even if she went to the police, it was hard to say what the outcome would be. However, Zhao Ying was not a normal female worker. She was from Miaojiang. Moreover, she was a true Miaojiang person who grew up in the deep mountains. After that night, Zhao Ying left the factory. A week later, something happened in the factory. First, Wang Liang's body was in an inexplicable pain. He was in so much pain that he was hovering between life and death. He rolled on the ground in pain. After he was sent to the hospital, the doctor could not find anything wrong with him. In the end, he wailed in the hospital room for an entire night. The next morning, he died from the pain. Wang Liang was the first. After that, all the people who participated that night were in the same situation as Wang Liang. Their bodies were in inexplicable pain. It was so painful that it felt like their organs were being torn apart. In the end, someone finally went to do an X-ray. Under the X-ray, they discovered that these people were filled with worms. The intense pain was because their internal organs were constantly being eaten by these worms. These dozen or so people also met the same fate. In the hospital room, they were tortured to death by the intense pain. However, this was not the end. Gradually, the other male workers in the factory began to experience the same symptoms. In the beginning, Dai Nanzhou's uncle, Wang Yongjun, did not care about this kind of thing. Although not many of his workers died, he had more than a dozen factories under him. This kind of thing was not uncommon. He just needed to pay some money and the matter would be over. However, when more than a dozen people met with the same accident at almost the same time, Wang Yongjun, who had a net worth of over 100 million yuan, could not sit still anymore. He hurriedly started to investigate this matter. When he found out the truth, these dozen or so hooligans were almost all dead. The other male workers in the factory also began to experience the symptoms of pain all over their bodies. At this time, Wang Yongjun was dumbfounded. He wanted to go and call the police. However, this kind of thing, the police would definitely not believe him. Moreover, this kind of criminal case, if the police really handled this case, his entire factory might be closed down. That would be a great loss. In desperation, he could only find someone to come and take a look. However, who knew that he had found several feng shui masters. When they saw the situation, several of them directly turned around and left, saying that they could not help with this kind of thing. Seeing more and more people met with the accident in the factory, Wang Yongjun felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. When he heard Dai Nanzhou mention me, he tried to make a desperate attempt and asked Dai Nanzhou to find me. Chapter 74. There was no record of Miaojiang's witchcraft in the death scripture. However, in reality, Miaojiang's witchcraft was quite famous, and I had studied it over the years. The core of Miaojiang's witchcraft was the use of goo worms. The person who cast the witchcraft could use goo worms to take people's lives without anyone knowing. They could even control other people's behavior. Their methods were strange and unpredictable, making it impossible to guard against them. In feng shui metaphysics, it wasn't difficult to achieve the effect of witchcraft against people, but it was almost impossible to do it in such a mysterious way. Over the years, I had analyzed the principles of witchcraft. Although I had some ideas, It was hard to say because I hadn't seen the specific witchcraft. As for dealing with the person who used witchcraft, I wasn't sure. Moreover, in this case, the Miao female worker called Zhao Ying was actually a victim. Although the means of revenge were a bit cruel, I couldn't really bear to deal with her. After thinking for a while, I asked Dai Nanzhou, that Zhao Ying is also a bitter person. Now that the people who bullied her are dead, if your uncle really wants to keep the peace, why doesn't he find Zhao Ying and give her some compensation so that she will stop? Dai Nanzhou slapped his thigh and said with a bitter face, "My uncle also wants to. His factory can't work anymore. If he could just compensate some money, he would be willing to spend as much as possible. However, the problem now is that he can't find Zhao Ying, and she doesn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Now, even I'm a little worried. I've been working as a technical consultant in that factory." I nodded, feeling a little gloomy. Although Zhao Ying was a victim, because of her revenge, so many innocent people were also implicated. This couldn't be justified no matter what. Although I sympathized with her, I couldn't approve of her behavior. From Chongqing to Shenzhen, it didn't take long to arrive at Baoan Airport. As soon as we got off the plane, Dai Nanzhou received a phone call and told me that his uncle, Wang Yongjun, had sent someone to wait for us outside. Looking at his hurried posture, it was obvious that Wang Yongjun was also very anxious. We didn't dare to delay. After leaving the airport, we found the driver sent by Wang Yongjun and rushed to Longgang. I thought that since Wang Yongjun was in a hurry, he would take me directly to the electronics factory. Who would have thought that the driver's MPV would take us to a big hotel? Then, he told me that Chief Wang was waiting to welcome me. When we arrived at the luxurious room of the hotel, I saw Wang Yongjun. He was a burly middle-aged man. Although Dai Nanzhou said that he was already in his 50s, he looked like he was only in his early 40s. His eyes were bright, and he appeared to be very shrewd and capable. Seeing us come in, Wang Yongjun stood up and warmly greeted me, shaking hands with me. Then, he arranged for me to sit down and served me the dishes. No matter what, he was a businessman. In such a critical situation, he was able to keep his cool. After we sat down and had a few bites of food, Wang Yongjun returned to the main topic. He started to talk about the factory. Although he wasn't a Cantonese man, he spoke with a Cantonese accent. He frowned and asked me, "Do you understand the situation? Are you sure about this?" I nodded. On the way here, Nanzhou already told me. I can't say for sure, but I can only do my best. I could tell that he wasn't satisfied with my words. However, as a businessman, he didn't say anything disheartening. Instead, he comforted me and said, "Just do your best." After eating, Wang Yongjun asked me where I was going to start. I thought for a moment and said, "Take me to see the workers who were in pain." No matter what, human lives were more important. Finding Zhao Ying wasn't urgent. Wang Yongjun didn't have any objections. He arranged for the driver to prepare the car. Then, he took us to the hospital. On the way, Wang Yongjun and I talked about feng shui. Guangdong was indeed a place where metaphysics flourished. Although Wang Yongjun was a businessman, he was able to talk about feng shui. It seemed he had a lot of knowledge about it. After talking for a while, I brought the topic back to Zhao Ying and asked Wang Yongjun, "Boss Wang, if this trip goes smoothly, can I make a request?" Wang Yongjun was stunned, but he still had a smile on his face. He answered me straightforwardly. "Brother Zhou, there's no harm in saying it. As long as it can solve this problem, you can make any request." I nodded. "If we find Zhao Ying, can you let me deal with her?" Zhao Ying's actions, from a legal point of view, were enough for her to be executed several times. However, her situation made me think of the old principal's daughter. I couldn't help but feel sympathy. In the end, if possible, I still wanted to help her. Wang Yongjun agreed without hesitation. Moreover, he said with a smile, "Brother Zhou, you're kind-hearted. However, since you said that, I can rest assured. It seems that Brother Zhou, you have a lot of confidence in solving this problem. He misunderstood, but I didn't explain further. I just smiled and didn't say anything else. When we arrived at the hospital, Wang Yongjun took us to a big room. As soon as we reached the door, we heard people screaming and screaming. It was clear that the people inside were in great pain. After we entered the room, I took a quick look. There were around a dozen beds in the room, all of which were occupied by patients. The workers Wang Yongjun had mentioned were all here. When we entered the room, we didn't cause any commotion. The workers were in great pain, and they didn't seem to notice us. I walked over and lifted the quilt of the worker who was closest to the door. As soon as the quilt was lifted, a strong stench of sweat came out. I held my breath and waited for the smell to disperse. Then, I lifted my head to look. A young man was curled up under the quilt. He was groaning unconsciously, and his body was shivering. He was sweating profusely, and his hands were pressing on his belly. It seemed the source of the pain was his belly. I didn't know much about venomous insects, and I couldn't see any insects. However, I could feel thick energy coming from this man. It came from his limbs and bones. Except for that, I didn't find anything strange. I thought for a while and put the quilt down. I got up and walked to the other patients. I observed them all. Their symptoms were the same as the first one. They were all affected by energy. It was the typical symptom of energy invading their bodies. I asked Dai Nanzhou and Wang Yongjun to leave first. Then, I took out a expelling talisman and stuck it on the young worker at the door. I used my Tao energy to trigger the talisman's power. Then, I chanted the calm heart mantra a few times and waited to see his situation. After the expelling talisman's power was activated, the young man's body shivered less frequently. Although he was groaning louder, it was because his vitality had recovered a little. That was why he had the energy to scream. After chanting the calm heart mantra a few times, he stopped groaning. He turned to look at me. His eyes were unfocused. Soon, he lowered his head and fell asleep. Hearing his steady breathing, I exhaled in relief. It seemed this method was effective. I stood by the bed and waited for a long time. However, I didn't see any poisonous insects come out of his body. I was a little discouraged. His symptoms were caused by a poisonous insect. If the insect didn't come out, he wouldn't be cured. However, I thought about it. Venomous insects were mysterious. In the rumors, they were like maggots in the bones. Except for the one who had cast the venomous insect, no one could cure him. It wasn't bad that I could do this. The effect was good on the first patient, so I copied him and did the same thing on the others. At first, I only had 4 or 5 expelling talismans. Although the poisonous insects were hard to deal with, they didn't have a lot of energy. After one talisman was used to cure one patient, there was still a lot of Tao energy left, which could be used by the next patient. Eventually, I had enough talismans to cure all the patients. After everyone had fallen asleep, I didn't leave the room. Instead, I called Tong Tong and asked her to check the energy in people's bodies. Can you feel the poisonous insects in their bodies? Tong Tong didn't know what a poisonous insect was. I had explained it to her for quite a long time, but she was still puzzled. Eventually, I had to give up and think of another solution. If the poisonous insects had thick energy, they would be attracted by the yang energy in people's bodies. That was why they wanted to eat them. With that thought, I silently used Tao energy to gather yang energy on my fingertip. Then, I placed my finger on the young worker's belly. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.